Hey guys, tonight we step into a palace so dazzling, it nearly blinds you with gold leaf and candlelight. You arrive not through a sleepy village lane, but straight into the beating heart of French absolutism. Versailles. The air is thick with powdered wigs, lavender water, and the faintest whiff of something less pleasant. But don't worry, nobody talks about that part out loud. They just smile and keep their sachets of dried herbs tucked up their sleeves. You're here for a night at court, but you're about to discover why no one ever says Versailles smelled as good as it looked. This isn't just a tour of chandeliers and fountains. No, this is an olfactory adventure into the bizarre world of hygiene, where filth hides behind silk curtains, and rosewater does the work of soap. You won't believe this, but many of these aristocrats thought bathing was dangerous, and that perfume was a kind of medical treatment. And as you'll see, the farther up the social ladder you climb, the less likely anyone is to clean themselves. Strange, right? All right, before you get too cozy, go ahead and smash that like button and subscribe, but only if your heart says yes. And while you're at it, drop your location and the local time in the comments. Always fun to see where you're tuning in from. Dim the lights, get that fan going for some background vibes, and let's chill into tonight's little adventure. You step through the colossal golden gates and enter the courtyard of Versailles. Cobblestones clatter underfoot, echoing off marble columns. Servants scurry like shadows at dusk, hauling baskets, fluffing wigs, and murmuring titles under their breath. Everywhere you turn there's velvet, satin, and the scent of something floral, trying a little too hard to mask something earthy. You get the distinct feeling that beneath the glittering surface this place is holding its breath. Your room? Yes, you get a room, is barely large enough for a bed and a wash basin, but it's technically within the palace walls. The walls are lined with embroidered fabric instead of paint or wood. Why? Because fabric looks rich, but it also holds smells like a sponge. The fire burns low in the hearth, struggling against the damp chill that creeps through the stone. You wonder how many others have slept here, sweating through brocade and linen never truly clean. The halls of Versailles are grand, but they never let you forget where you are in the hierarchy. As you pass by the king's chamber, yes, that king, you notice a thick cloud of scented air hanging outside his door like a wall. Inside it smells of rosewater and civet musk, a strange combination of perfume and animal gland. The court believes strong odours keep bad humours away. A whiff of vinegar, they think, might ward off the plague. As you're escorted through the hall of mirrors, you can't help but notice how stunning everything looks at a distance, and how cracked and grimy it appears up close. The mirrors aren't cleaned daily. That's far too risky for their fragile silvered surfaces. The smell of candle wax mixes with something older, sweat, damp velvet, perhaps the breath of 100 courtiers from years ago trapped in the fabric of the drapes, and yet everyone here is pretending not to notice. A duchess glides past you with a polite nod, her cheeks painted crimson and her wig powdered to a snowy white. You can almost see the lice moving beneath the curls. But she smiles, because that's what people do here. Versailles is about image, shimmering illusion. The stink? That's someone else's problem. Just before supper, you find yourself in the marble courtyard. The tiles shine with rainwater that hasn't quite dried. You watch a gentleman in embroidered heels relieve himself discreetly into a corner before adjusting his cuffs and strolling back inside. No one says a word. You quickly learn that Versailles is not a place for privacy, but it is a place for pretending. Pretending everything smells fine. Pretending filth doesn't exist. And you start to pretend too. Dinner is announced not with a bell, but with a parade. Literally. Trumpets echo through the halls, announcing the king's approach to the dining salon. As you follow the swell of finely dressed nobles, you catch a strange blend of aromas trailing behind them: ambergris, musk, dried orange peel, and underneath it all something unmistakably human. It's not just you. Everyone smells like this, and no one, absolutely no one, mentions it. Inside the grand dining chamber, the table is a glittering expanse of silver, crystal, and floral centerpieces. But before you even sit down, your nose tells you a different story. The scent of roasted pheasant and almond paste mingles with damp wool and old sweat. Most guests wear the same outfits several days in a row. Washing garments frequently is considered risky. It wears down the delicate fabric, they say. Plus, if you wear perfume and powdered wigs, why bother? You take your seat beside a marquis who smells of violets and horses. He's friendly enough, but as he leans over to whisper a joke, his breath nearly knocks you over. They brush their teeth here, if you can call it that, but with powdered coral and burnt shells, not minty freshness. Some even swish with wine or urine. Others chew herbs or cloves, but breath? It's rarely fresh. Midway through the meal, someone passes you a small object wrapped in silk. You open it, a perfumed pomander ball. You're advised to keep it close to your nose for the more pungent moments. Apparently the cheese course is coming. You oblige, grateful. The pomander is filled with crushed rose petals, cinnamon, clove, and just a hint of vinegar. It doesn't mask the scent so much as distract you from it. As you sip your wine, your attention drifts upward. You notice the chandeliers above you are crusted with wax and soot. The high ceilings help, yes, but they also trap heat, an odour swirling it around like a warm fog. You realise that Versailles doesn't breathe, it festers. After dinner, the crowd disperses into salons for music, gambling, or gossip. You join a group in a richly furnished drawing room, where the tapestry-covered walls conceal more than just wood. They hide mildew and mouse droppings too. The furniture is ornate but rarely cleaned. When you sit, a small puff of dust escapes the cushion. No one reacts. Later, back in your chamber, you attempt to freshen up. There's a silver basin and a pitcher of lukewarm water. No soap, just a cloth, a comb, and a vial of rose water. You dab your face and neck as instructed. Real baths, you're told, are for the sick or sinful. A healthy cleanse through friction and fragrance. You lie back on the embroidered pillow and pull the velvet coverlet over your shoulders. The smell of someone else's perfume from long ago lingers in the fabric. You try not to think about it. You've made it through your first night. Tomorrow you'll learn to walk the halls like everyone else, head high, pomander in hand and nose in denial. And as you drift off to sleep under a ceiling gilded in gold, you finally understand. Versailles is not a place of comfort. It's a theatre, a glittering stage where everyone knows their lines, but no one ever says the word filth. You wake to the sound of footsteps echoing through the corridor and a knock that is more ceremonial than necessary. A footman enters without waiting, announcing that morning has begun and the king's rising is imminent. You blink against the light filtering through heavy curtains. The air in the room is thick and stale. Yesterday's perfume, faint sweat, and the sour note of damp stone. There's no fresh breeze to greet you, only the heavy breath of Versailles. You stretch and glance toward the basin, still half filled with the cloudy water you used to wipe your face the night before. No one brings new water unless you request it, and even then, hot water is a luxury reserved for the few. What you do receive, however, is a fresh handkerchief sprinkled with lavender water and a comb to tease your hair into courtly shape. You're starting to realise that here, cleanliness doesn't mean washing, it means masking. A valet appears to help you dress layer by layer. Each garment, chemise, stockings, breeches, waistcoat is powdered lightly, not to clean it, but to give the illusion of freshness. These clothes haven't been washed in weeks, sometimes months. The noble class believes too much laundering damages expensive fabrics, so instead they air clothes by the window, beat out dust and reapply perfumes. You do your best to keep from sneezing as the powder from the valet's gloves fills the room with the scent of orris root and something vaguely sour. Once dressed, you're led down the corridor, past other courtiers adjusting wigs and sniffing their own cuffs. One young woman pauses to rub her hands with a slice of lemon, not for cleanliness, but to sweeten her skin's scent. Everyone has their tricks. A gentleman passing you smells faintly of camphor and vinegar, his personal defence against bad air, which doctors say causes illness. You nod politely and hold your breath. At breakfast the room is bright and noisy. Platters of bread, fruit and warm milk sit on a long table, but there's no hand-washing before the meal. Some nobles wear gloves to eat, others simply wipe their fingers on perfumed napkins. You notice that no one discusses hygiene openly. It would be considered vulgar to mention dirt, sweat, or worse, and yet it lingers everywhere. Across the room, a noble woman fans herself with a delicate lace fan doused in violet essence. Her face is painted stark white, and tiny cracks in the makeup reveal sores underneath. The white paint is a mixture of lead and vinegar known to corrode skin, but it's fashionable. The more flawless the face, the more refined the lady. Health beneath that surface is an afterthought. Between bites of fruit and sips of watered wine, someone makes a casual remark about a friend who caught a summer fever and was bled 3 times before recovering. You nod solemnly, pretending not to remember that illness is often worsened by the very treatments meant to cure it. You're starting to understand that hygiene at Versailles isn't about cleanliness. It's about appearances, rituals, and keeping up with the illusion that beauty means health. Later, as you're led to the chapel to observe the king's public mass, you pass a room filled with servants boiling something in copper pots. Not soup, linens. Once every few weeks they're scalded with lye, then dried in the sun. Not to make them white, but to kill whatever lives inside them. You inhale deeply as you pass, the scent of soap and ash a rare relief. But that clean smell, it never lasts long. After chapel, the halls grow warmer as more bodies fill them. Sunlight pours through tall windows, heating the stone floors and stirring up the aromas that cling to every tapestry and velvet drape. You pause beside a window in search of fresh air, only to find it's been sealed shut. Versailles isn't designed for ventilation, it's designed to impress. And as the scent of pressed wigs and powdered feet thickens, you begin to feel the consequences. You follow a group into one of the salons for a mid-morning gathering, a sort of unofficial court ritual where nobles pose, gossip and hover around influence. Everyone looks pristine from a distance, powdered faces, gleaming shoes, jewel-studded gloves. But up close, cracks begin to show, quite literally. You notice a marquise's collar stained faintly yellow at the edges, her perfume no match for last night's perspiration. She fans herself with slow, deliberate grace. The heat, she murmurs, brings out the worst in the linens. She says this with a smile, and no one questions what that means. You catch sight of another noble discreetly scratching his wig line. A footman quickly steps in to adjust it with gloved hands, pretending not to notice the crawling sensation he likely feels beneath the powder. You excuse yourself and make your way down a side corridor, where the air is slightly cooler. Here, behind the polished presentation, the smell of Versailles becomes something less performative and more honest. A mix of damp wool, floor wax and bodies in long, stale garments. You pass a storage alcove where old wigs hang on pegs like trophies, each dusted in talcum and patched with cloth where lice once chewed through. At the far end of the hall you discover a servant quietly wiping down a banister with a cloth soaked in brandy. Not soap, brandy. It's used for nearly everything here. Cleaning, disinfecting, even perfume base. She glances up, startled, then curtsies quickly before vanishing behind a hidden door. You wonder if she's one of the lucky ones who gets to bathe. Some senior servants are allowed to use hot water once a week, though it's more about functionality than luxury. Back in the main hall, you overhear a physician discussing the health of an elderly baron. "He's stopped sweating," the doctor says gravely. "We've applied more powder, but I'm afraid the balance of humours is failing. It's meant in earnest." At Versailles, sweat is not a sign of exertion, it's a medical signal. The balance of bile, blood, phlegm and black bile governs everything from appetite to behaviour. Water is believed to open the pores and let in illness, which is why real bathing is rare and often feared. Instead, nobles rely on dry friction, rubbing cloths over the skin to remove visible dirt. Perfume follows: rosewater, orange blossom, lavender, even vinegar-soaked sponges dabbed on the temples. You're offered a lemon to carry in your handkerchief. Good against plague, a gentleman assures you. You take it, not because you believe him, but because the alternative is trusting the air inside these walls. By midday you've begun to itch beneath your collar. You're sweating lightly under layers of wool and silk. But there's no changing, no freshening up. Only more powder, more scent, more illusion. The people around you are glittering, fragrant ghosts, hovering just above their own decay, pretending it's not there. And you? You're learning to do the same. The polished corridors of Versailles are deceiving. They gleam beneath the heels of nobles and the soft slippers of powdered courtiers. But beneath that shine is a truth you can't unsee. You're walking through a palace with hundreds of rooms and thousands of people, yet plumbing, almost non-existent. The truth hits you the moment you see it. A chamber pot, still half full, tucked behind a velvet curtain in an unused alcove. It's not hidden well. You weren't even looking for it. But there it is, waiting patiently to be emptied, just like dozens of others. You start to notice more of them. Behind screens, under beds, beside writing desks. They're ceramic, brass, even gold-leafed for the wealthier nobles. But their function is the same, and their smell, even with lids and perfume satchels, is hard to ignore. Versailles has a staff for everything: valets to lace corsets, footmen to open doors, servants to turn the pages of books. But sanitation, that's where the system begins to crack. Each morning, servants haul away hundreds of these pots to be emptied, some into designated cesspits, others straight out the window. Yes, really. You pass a side chamber just in time to hear someone shout "Garde à l'eau," the traditional warning before tossing the contents into the courtyard below. It's meant to alert passers-by to step aside. But in a palace this crowded, not everyone listens. As you peer down from a stone balcony, you notice a darkened corner near the servants' entrance. It's damp, permanently. A trickle runs along the edge of the cobblestones, winding between mossy stones and cracked tile. You follow its path with your eyes, realizing it doesn't lead anywhere. It just evaporates underfoot or soaks into the earth. There's no sewage system beneath your feet, no pipes, no drainage. Versailles was designed for grandeur, not practicality. Inside, the same indifference continues. You watch a courtier lift her gown ever so slightly to avoid a puddle in the hallway. No one flinches. The marble floors are rarely mopped. Instead, servants sprinkle them with dry herbs and crushed leaves. Rosemary, thyme, lavender, to mask whatever spills accumulate. The effect is fragrant, but not clean. Later, while lingering near the Queen's antechamber, you notice a curtained-off area that smells distinctly sharp and earthy. A maid slips in and out quickly, carrying a brass pot and avoiding eye contact. You realize this is one of the palace's many secret conveniences, makeshift bathrooms created behind tapestries or screens. They're not marked, not official, but everyone knows where they are. The strangest part, The nobles don't seem to mind. In fact, they see these conditions as a kind of natural order. It's not that they enjoy the filth. They've just convinced themselves it doesn't exist. The floors are marble, the curtains are silk, the air is scented with violets. So how could anything possibly be unclean? You begin to see the mental acrobatics required to live here, to walk past the scent of old chamber pots and still speak of refinement, to avoid eye contact with a valet disposing of human waste and still discuss poetry over breakfast. At Versailles, illusion is survival. You duck into a side stairwell to catch your breath, only to find yet another pot, this one cracked, sitting on the steps. Above it, the wall is stained. You wonder how long it's been there. No one has removed it. No one will. Later that day, you're invited to accompany a nobleman through the more private corridors of the palace, the ones not shown to ambassadors or foreign dignitaries. You nod eagerly, thinking this might offer a cleaner, more elegant side of Versailles. Instead, you find yourself navigating a maze of back hallways that smell of damp plaster, mildew, and something acrid you can't quite place. He stops to adjust his lace cuffs, leaning casually against a wooden panel. They say the king has 37 secret staircases, he tells you, chuckling, but I suspect most of them lead to chamber pots instead of mistresses. You both laugh, but as you round the next corner, the truth in his words becomes clear. There, behind a half-open door, is a narrow closet lined with nothing but filled pots. Lids askew, the scent overpowering. A servant rushes past you with a look of practiced neutrality, 2 full vessels in each hand. You watch him vanish down a back stairwell with barely a slosh. No one thanks him. No one speaks to him. His job is to make the waste disappear without ever being seen. But it doesn't disappear. It lingers on the steps, in the cracks, in the very breath of the walls. Back in the more public rooms, nobles drift through conversations as if Versailles were a pristine garden of reason and elegance. A poet declaims verses beside an unlit fireplace. A lady plays a minuet on a gilded harpsichord, her powdered hair bobbing slightly with the rhythm. You stand nearby, the echo of chamber pots still fresh in your mind, and marvel at the disconnect. They've perfected the art of elegant denial. Then you notice something strange. In certain parts of the palace, the floorboards are slightly warped, bowed up in the middle or sagging toward corners. Servants step around these spots instinctively. You ask one about it, and he leans in, voice low. Below, there's rot, he says, years of water and worse leaking into the beams. He straightens, forces a smile, and disappears before anyone can notice he spoke to you. Even the king's own quarters aren't immune. You're told in hushed tones that His Majesty sometimes rises in the middle of the night, not to pray, but to relieve himself behind a velvet curtain near his bed. The royal chamber pot is gold-trimmed, perfumed daily, and emptied by a specific servant of high rank. The court calls him la charge d'affaires. No one laughs when they say it. Outside in the courtyards, it's no better. The vast expanse of gravel and grass glitters under the sun, but the hedges, they hide 1,000 secrets. You overhear gardeners joke about finding surprises every morning, ladies who couldn't wait, gentlemen too drunk to walk back inside. Some bushes are even worn thin, trampled from overuse. Versailles may be the centre of European refinement, but sometimes it smells like the back alley of a tavern. And yet, none of this breaks the illusion. Music plays, dresses sweep, perfume clouds hover. The chamber pots are full, the halls are fragrant, and Versailles continues to shine, like a diamond slowly cracking from the inside. You catch yourself glancing at your feet now before every step, just in case. You step into the gardens of Versailles expecting relief, Open skies, fresh air, the perfume of manicured flowers. For a moment it works. The sun is warm but gentle, filtered through the trees lining the Grande Allée. Birds flit between branches. Marble fountains splash quietly in the distance. It feels like escape. And then a breeze shifts. It carries something unexpected. Not the fragrance of roses or lilac, but the unmistakable, unpleasant waft of human waste. You stop walking. Look around. The gravel paths are pristine, the flower beds perfectly trimmed. There's not a soul out of place, and yet the smell persists, faint but undeniable. As you continue your stroll, you begin to understand why. The gardens of Versailles are not just for admiring. They are, quite literally, the palace's backup toilets, with thousands of courtiers, nobles, servants, and guests milling about daily, and so few actual latrines. People resort to what's available, and when inside options run short, they simply step outside, into the hedges, behind a statue, into a little alcove of boxwood just out of view. No one announces it, no one cleans it up regularly, but it happens constantly. You turn a corner and stumble, almost comically, upon an abandoned chamber pot half hidden behind a marble urn. The porcelain is cracked, the contents long dried and baking under the sun. A line of ants trails across the rim. This isn't an accident. This is normal. A gardener nearby notices your look of alarm. He shrugs. Better here than inside, he mutters, before returning to his shears. You watch as he calmly snips at a hedge where the grass seems unnaturally patchy. Another place likely used for impromptu relief. It's not just servants or drunken guests either. Nobles do it too. They've simply perfected the art of pretending they don't. A young comte once famously excused himself from a conversation, stepped behind a rose trellis, and returned 2 minutes later without missing a beat. No one even blinked. The dignity of Versailles lies not in sanitation, but in never acknowledging discomfort. Some areas of the gardens are worse than others. The Grove of Apollo, with its hidden nooks and dramatic fountains, is a favourite spot for privacy. You find a bench there, ornate, chipped, and stained in ways you'd rather not examine. When you sit, the wood is warm from the sun, but also faintly sticky. You stand back up. You begin to notice patterns, servants laying fresh gravel over footpaths in odd patches, ground that seems slightly raised near sculptures, a subtle but constant hum of flies in certain corners, no matter how elegant the surroundings. And yet, parties continue here. Royal concerts, firework displays, and midnight walks all take place amid this quiet reality. Guests wear silk shoes worth more than most servants make in a year, shoes that now crunch through gravel, where chamber pots were quietly empty just hours earlier. At one point, you spot a noble woman discreetly adjusting her skirts as she emerges from behind a hedge. Her cheeks are flushed, but her posture is flawless. She rejoins her companions and resumes conversation about poetry, never once acknowledging her absence. You say nothing. That's the rule here. Versailles runs on denial as much as it runs on gold. Later in the afternoon, you find yourself wandering farther from the main palace, beyond the vast formal gardens, into the Queen's Hamlet. It's a constructed village, picturesque, quaint, and intentionally rustic. Here, Marie Antoinette would dress as a shepherdess and pretend to live a simpler life. There are no chamber pots on golden pedestals here, just dirt paths, low fences, and small wooden cottages trimmed with ivy. But even here, illusion rules over practicality. The cottages, while charming from afar, are just facades. The interiors are either empty or far too ornate to be truly humble. And though the hamlet seems like a breath of fresh air, it too has no proper latrines. Servants report that during performances or private visits, nobles would relieve themselves behind the artificial barn, or lean discreetly against the back of the dairy house. The Queen herself was rarely seen without her perfumed handkerchief. You pause near the artificial lake and see a child, likely the son of a lesser noble, squatting at the edge of the reeds, his governess turned politely away. You look elsewhere. It's better that way. Everyone at Versailles learns when to look and when not to. As you walk back toward the palace, retracing the winding garden paths, you notice how worn the hedges are at waist level. A groundskeeper once joked that if the shrubs of Versailles could talk, they'd tell stories no court poet would dare write. You believe him now. Near the orangery, where exotic citrus trees bloom in geometric rows, you sit on a stone bench. The scent here is better. Orange blossom, damp earth, trimmed leaves, but still faintly mingled with the sharp tang of ammonia. The palace may commission barrels of perfume, but nothing can fully mask the volume of bodies passing through this space day after day. A group of courtiers stroll past, laughing lightly as they sniff their scented gloves and discuss the king's hunting schedule. One of them carries a pomander ball on a ribbon around his neck. Another dabs her temple with a cloth soaked in rose vinegar. It's subtle, practiced, and constant. Here, masking scent is not just habit, it's etiquette. You begin to think of Versailles as an enormous theatre. The garden paths are stage wings, the hedges curtains, and every noble an actor in a play of refined civility. The only difference is that in this theatre, the orchestra pit is lined with chamber pots, and the audience pretends not to smell them. As twilight approaches, golden light spills across the grounds, making every fountain sparkle and every window blaze. It is visually magnificent. You stop near this fountain of Latona and admire the craftsmanship, the dramatic tiers of marble and gilded myth. But as you draw closer, the scent of the water is less divine than expected. Algae, stagnation, a vague hint of rot. These fountains are decorative, not clean. Their water isn't for drinking, and it certainly isn't for bathing. Behind you, a pair of nobles giggle as they sneak behind a vine-draped arbour. You know what they're about to do. You turn back to the palace and continue walking. By now, you've trained yourself not to flinch at what you smell, not to react to the stains, the ants, the occasional pile of something best left unexamined. Like everyone else, you're learning to drift through Versailles with your chin lifted, your nose perfumed, and your senses only half awake. Because if you stop pretending, the whole illusion crumbles, and Versailles cannot afford that. Back inside the palace, you're summoned to an audience chamber where fashion, politics, and rumour swirl together in a powdered fog. This is where nobles make their presence known, not through words, but through hair. Yes, hair, or rather, what passes for it. As you step through the gilded doorway, you're greeted not by conversation, but by a forest of towering wigs. Some are curled, some are feathered, and some are so high they practically brush the carved ceiling beams. It's a sea of white powdered grandeur, each one more absurd than the last. You're barely 5 minutes in before you spot a marquis whose wig features an actual miniature sailing ship balanced among the curls. And no, that's not a joke. But beneath the spectacle lies something far less glamorous. The wigs you see aren't cleaned. They're not even particularly well maintained. They're repowdered, rearranged, and decorated, but rarely, if ever, washed. That's because many are made from human or horsehair stitched onto linen caps, and dampening them risks damage or mould. So instead, wearers simply powder over the grime, and what lurks beneath, a whole world of creatures. As you lean closer to admire a duchess's feathered poof, you catch her discreetly scratching behind one ear. She smiles as if nothing's amiss, but you spot the faint red line of irritation along her hairline. Lice are a quiet epidemic at court, especially in the hotter months. Most nobles know this and simply live with it. The powder helps. It suffocates some of the insects, but not all, Some crawl, some bite, and some migrate. You feel an itch begin behind your own ear. You ignore it. A valet nearby tends to a noble's wig with a long-handled puff stick, tapping fresh starch and lavender powder into the layers. The air fills with a fine mist that settles on your coat. It smells pleasant, floral, sweet, a little musty, but you can't help wondering what it's covering. The valet's apron is stained with oil and something vaguely yellow. He handles the wig like a gardener pruning a hedge. You're starting to think that might not be a bad analogy. Later, in a quieter drawing room, you find yourself seated beside a viscount who's been wearing the same wig for 3 days straight. You know this because the same blue ribbon has been pinned to the back since you arrived at Versailles. He leans in and confides, "I'd change it, but the new one's full of powder beetles." He says this with the same tone someone might use to mention a spoiled dessert. Mild annoyance, nothing more. You ask if that's common. He nods. "Oh, they nest in the seams, especially if the wig's been left near the hearth. I had one crawl down my collar once. Dreadful business." You both sip your wine and change the subject. In the court of Versailles, wigs are more than fashion, they're armour. A well-powdered head signifies wealth, poise, and participation in the social game. A bare head, or worse, unkempt. Hair? Scandalous. Only the very ill or the very low-born would dare appear without their powdered disguise. You pass by a mirror later and catch sight of yourself. Your own wig slightly askew, a puff of powder clinging to your brow, the scent of orris and lavender still hovering near your collar. You smile. You're starting to blend in. That evening, you're granted access to the dressing chamber of a duchess, one of the more envied women at court. Her reputation is polished, flawless fashion, impeccable posture, endless charm. But as you step inside, you see what it costs to maintain the illusion. 2 maids flank her, lifting off her wig like it's a sacred relic. Underneath, her real hair lies slicked flat with oil, tightly braided to keep it from matting. Her scalp is red in patches, and as one maid carefully dabs the skin with rose water, the other picks out the remnants of dead lice, using a fine-toothed comb and a cloth-covered finger. The Duchess doesn't flinch. She just sips her cordial and stares blankly at the opposite wall. You don't ask questions. No one does. This is the routine. The wig is placed on a wooden headform and dusted with more powder, this time mixed with dried lavender and crushed iris root. Not to freshen it, only to cloak it. The maid checks for beetles, tiny dark insects that feed on starch and warmth. One is found, flicked away without a word, and the padding inside the cap is reset. By tomorrow morning, the whole thing will be back on her head like nothing ever happened. You wonder how many others walk around Versailles with this same quiet burden on their scalps. Powder may look elegant, but it clogs pores, cakes into sores, and when mixed with sweat, turns into a paste that smells faintly sour. But still, it's better than showing bare skin. That would be far more offensive here. As you walk back toward your own chamber, you pass a group of noblemen laughing loudly in the corridor. One leans against the wall, scratching behind his ear while balancing a goblet of brandy. Another jokes about trading wigs for sport, as if they were hats. You catch a glimpse of his hairline. It's red, raw, and rimmed with scabs. He grins like he doesn't feel a thing. In a nearby alcove, a pile of used wig powder sits discarded in a silver bowl. It's mixed with hair clippings and the faint shimmer of crushed pearls, sometimes added for a sparkle effect. A mouse sniffs at the edge of the bowl before darting behind a tapestry. You're not sure which is more disturbing, the mouse, or the fact that no one else even notices it. That night you remove your own wig slowly, gingerly, careful not to disturb whatever ecosystem might be forming underneath. You examine it in the low light. The powder is clumping slightly at the crown, and there's a faint trace of something dark at the seam. You brush it away and set the wig gently beside your wash basin. You stare at yourself in the mirror. Your real hair flattened, a fine layer of powder on your cheeks, and the smell of orris root clinging stubbornly to your neck. You look older, paler, stranger. But more importantly, you look acceptable. Because here at Versailles, being clean isn't about being free of dirt. It's about never letting anyone see it. And as you climb into bed with a perfumed handkerchief tucked beneath your pillow, you realise that the most important part of hygiene here isn't soap or water, it's silence. The morning air at Versailles is heavy, not with mist or dew, but with perfume and the slow churn of breath under velvet. You wake to find yesterday's powders clinging to your skin, the folds of your garments stiff with sweat turned starch. There's no bath drawn for you. There won't be. Instead, a valet enters with a fresh linen cloth, a comb, and a small flask of rose water. You know the ritual by now. You strip down behind a privacy screen, not for modesty, but to preserve illusion. No one wants to see what lies beneath all the silk. Your undershirt is yellowed at the collar, and a faint sour scent rises as you peel it off. You wipe yourself down briskly with the damp cloth, dabbing behind your ears, between your fingers, under your arms. You do not scrub. That would be too rough for the skin, the court says. Just a gentle press, a quick pass. You dry off with a hand towel that hasn't been boiled in weeks. Then come the layers. The stockings first, pulled tight and powdered at the knees. Then the breeches, the shirt, the waistcoat, the jacket. Each one perfumed not to cleanse but to disguise. You're beginning to recognise the specific scents of your fellow courtiers. One smells faintly of orange peel and cloves, another of camphor and lavender. You try different combinations each day, hoping to find the one that best hides your own truth. But nothing covers everything, not really. Your shoes are handed to you, soft leather, buckle polished, the inside slightly damp from yesterday's wear. No one wears fresh shoes each day. Most have just one or two pairs. You slide them on, ignoring the squish of old sweat and powder inside. Then you stand tall, adjust your collar, and exit into the hall, where the smell of 20 other people doing the same hits you like warm fog. Today, you're summoned to observe the Queen's wardrobe ritual. You file in with a dozen others, all pretending not to see the stains at the hem of the curtains or the mould blooming quietly in the ceiling corners. The Queen sits poised, motionless, while her dressers remove her nightgown and replace it with a gown of taffeta so stiff with starch it creaks. They don't wash these dresses. They air them out each night and rub them with cloth soaked in wine vinegar and crushed thyme. If the scent holds, the dress is clean. You watch as her corset is cinched tight, pulling her waist inward until her breathing becomes shallow. It's lined with old linen that has never been laundered, replaced only when too soiled to salvage. She winces slightly, then smiles. Fashion is discipline, someone murmurs beside you. You nod, because here, filth is endured quietly. Later, as you pass through the hall of mirrors, you pause beside one of the grand windows. You see yourself reflected dimly, powdered, perfumed, pressed into your finest shape. You look respectable, refined. But you also know what lies underneath. Sweat, grime, a patch of rash forming at your collar. Sore spot on your heel from the rubbing of unwashed stockings. You smile anyway. That's the only rule that matters. And behind you, the reflection of another courtier adjusting his stained cravat. He nods to you with regal poise. You nod back. Of course. By midday, the air inside the palace thickens, not with heat, though the sun has begun to press hard against the stone walls, but with layers of bodies, breath, fabric, and fragrance. You're attending a gathering in the Salon de Diane, where lords and ladies move like painted figurines through a room too full of people and far too lacking in air. The air doesn't move, it lingers. Every guest is wrapped in layers of wool, silk, and lace. But beneath those layers, no one is truly clean. Corsets trap moisture, stockings hold sweat, and yet the gowns and coats are worn again and again, sometimes for weeks without being properly washed. Cleaning expensive garments is a last resort. Soap and water fade dyes, shrink fabric, weaken seams. So the noble solution? Hide the truth. You watch as a countess gently flaps a handkerchief under her chin. It's damp with sweat. But the cloth is laced with violet water, which releases a faint perfume each time she waves it. A nearby baron wears a vest so stiff with powdered starch, it almost crackles when he moves. You can see white dust on his shoulder, and beneath his eyes, dark rings. Exhaustion, maybe, or just the body protesting its confinement. Your own clothes are beginning to itch. The jacket is warm now, clinging in places it shouldn't. You feel the irritation blooming near your waistline where the lining, never fully dry from yesterday, rubs your skin raw. But you say nothing. Instead you smile, nod at a passing viscount, and hold your perfume gloves just under your nose. The room is crowded with conversation, music in one corner, a heated discussion of opera in another. You shift your weight and feel the slickness at the small of your back. You glance to the side and catch a young chevalier discreetly fanning himself with a letter. His lace cuffs are stained, but his expression is serene. In Versailles, that's the art, showing nothing. As the gathering breaks for refreshments, trays of fruit, biscuits, and cordial wine circulate. No one washes their hands. Some use handkerchiefs to dab their fingers. Others simply lick them. You notice fingerprints on the glass of a shared goblet. Lipstick, sweat, sugar, and maybe more. But the court is unconcerned. Germ theory hasn't arrived yet. Filth is considered a personal flaw, not a communal risk. You step outside briefly to escape the heat. The marble terrace is still warm from the morning sun. A breeze stirs the lace at your collar and carries with it a mix of distant jasmine, horse stables, and something acrid. Likely the waste trench behind the servants' wing. You glance down at your shoes. The leather is dull. The seams hold traces of yesterday's dust and grit. You think about asking, "For Polish?" Then dismiss the idea. No one will notice. As long as the buckle gleams and the gait is elegant, everything beneath the surface can be ignored. And so, you do what everyone else does. You go back inside, lift your chin, breathe through linen, and carry on. You're a part of Versailles now. You've seen enough perfume to drown in it. But now it's time to witness the face behind the fragrance, the carefully curated mask that every noble at Versailles wears, quite literally. You're summoned to observe a private dressing ritual, not of clothing this time, but of the face. The Comtesse is already seated when you arrive, lit from behind by soft morning light that filters through a gauze curtain. Her real face, the one beneath the powder, is a patchwork of pale, irritated skin and faint scabs. Her maid delicately blots her cheeks with a linen square soaked in diluted vinegar. It stings, you're told, but it tightens the skin, closes the pores, and prepares the canvas. What follows is less like applying makeup and more like plastering a wall. A thick, chalky paste of white lead and vinegar is spread over her face, smoothed with a spatula made of ivory. It cakes into the corners of her eyes and along her jawline. A second layer follows. The goal is not beauty, it's perfection. Pale, poreless, unhuman perfection. Rouge comes next. Not the subtle flush of modern sensibility, but bold, unapologetic red, painted in wide circles on the cheeks like a porcelain doll. It's made from cinnabar, or sometimes carmine beetles, crushed into dust and mixed with animal fat. The smell is sharp, almost metallic. The lips are tinted with cochineal, or, if supply runs low, a stain made from rose petals and alcohol. No one applies makeup with their fingers. That would be uncouth. The Comtesse's maid uses brushes made of squirrel hair and fine sponges soaked in wine. And once it's finished, the transformation is astonishing. The sores vanish. The unevenness disappears. What's left is a face that gleams with status, not health. Beauty is not about looking young. It's about looking expensive. You glance around the room and notice the tools of the trade. Bowls of powder, broken brushes, crumpled cloth stiff with residue. The air smells like a cabinet of curiosities, floral, sour, dusty. You suppress a cough. The Comtesse stands, now fully adorned, and waves a gloved hand in the air. She expects the powder to settle before she walks, like a queen through fog. Her wig is lowered gently onto her head, and the final effect is startling. She looks nothing like the woman you saw when you entered. She's taller, paler, almost glowing. Her real skin doesn't matter now. Her breath, which smells faintly of wine and cloves, will not be commented on. Her eyes are rimmed with charcoal, drawing attention away from the redness at their edges. You follow her out into the corridor. Heads turn, bows are exchanged, compliments rise like steam. Radiant, flawless, like marble. No one sees the irritation under the powder, the beetle shells ground into her cheeks, or the headaches she'll nurse by evening from the weight of the makeup and wig. You pass a mirror and catch your own reflection. You look plain, natural, a dangerous thing here. A valet offers you a small silver case. Inside, a cake of white paint and a small mirror. You take it, because if you want to belong here, your real face won't do. Later that afternoon, you're invited to a gathering of noble women in the Queen's private salon, a space meant for elegance, conversation, and the subtle showcasing of appearance. But as you enter, the light streaming through the windows reveals something their candles often obscure. Tiny flecks of white powder drift through the air. They sparkle for a moment, like dust in a cathedral, before settling on shoulders, lashes, lips. Every face in the room is painted, not just lightly, but thoroughly, sealed, layered, perfected. These aren't the faces of youth or vibrance, they are symbols, masks of power. The paler the complexion, the higher the rank, or so the court whispers. And here, in this cocoon of brocade and muslin, the real skin beneath is irrelevant. You sit beside a baroness whose cheeks are tinted a vivid, unnatural red. Up close, her skin looks fragile, cracked slightly near the nose where the lead-based foundation has dried into tiny veins. She fans herself with a gloved hand and offers you a soft smile. "It's best not to move too much," she says quietly. "Cracking is vulgar." You nod. You barely breathe. Throughout the hour, maids flit in and out, refreshing powder with long-handled puffers and dabbing at foreheads with cloth soaked in violet water. No one refers to sweat. They call it moisture. Rouge is reapplied with silent precision. Lip colour is touched up without a word. One woman discreetly uses a brass spoon to scrape away flaking lead paint from her chin before covering it again with fresh powder. It's all part of the performance, and yet there's an undercurrent here, a quiet understanding among the women. They know the paint is toxic, they know the powders irritate, but the cost of being barefaced in Versailles is social ruin. Better to risk rash, sores, even slow poisoning, than to show the truth beneath the mask. A maid offers you a small brush and a mirror. You hesitate, then dip the bristles into the rouge and follow the example. A dot on each cheek, then a smear across the lips. Your skin tingles. Is it irritation or shame? Hard to say. But when you catch sight of yourself again, the transformation is clear. You no longer look like someone peering into this world from the outside. Now you belong to it. The Queen herself appears briefly, gliding through the room like a statue come to life. Her face is a masterpiece, so flawless it's frightening. But if you look closely, just for a second, you can see the toll beneath the surface, the tightness of her jaw, the shallow breaths, the occasional twitch near her right eye from the weight of her wig. When she exits, no one speaks for a moment. Then the room exhales, quietly, delicately, behind lace fans. That night, you remove your makeup by candlelight. The process is slow and strangely painful. The white paste clings to your skin, resisting every cloth and drop of rose oil. Underneath, your cheeks are red and tender. A small blister forms at your temple where the powder was too thick. You stare into the mirror. You're exhausted, not from dancing or conversation, but from maintaining the illusion. You lie down with your face freshly coated in lavender cream, not for healing, but to mask the smell of old paint. The pillow smells faintly of last night's powder. You turn it over, because here at Versailles, even your rest must be scented. The next morning you wake with a headache. It's a dull, pulsing weight behind your eyes, likely from the residue of lead and rosewater still clinging to your skin. You sit up slowly, the pillow marked faintly with a pale smear of yesterday's face paint. As you wash with cold water and a square of stiff linen, you feel a small sting on your cheek. Your skin is raw in places, chafed from layers of cosmetics and the nightly struggle to remove them. You begin to understand something important. Versailles doesn't just ignore discomfort, it transforms it into ritual. As you make your way to the antechamber for the morning greeting, a courtier slips a small cloth sachet into your hand. "For the nose," he whispers. You open it. Crushed lavender, clove, mint leaves, and something vaguely vinegar-soaked. You thank him without asking why. You already know. Smell governs everything here. Aromas are more than a matter of etiquette. They are social survival. The court exists in a fog of scent. Handkerchiefs, gloves, wigs, letters, even fans are doused in heavy fragrance. Because the truth is, everyone stinks. The unwashed clothes, the sweating bodies, the mould behind the tapestries. Versailles is beautiful only to the eye. The nose tells another story. You step into the hall of mirrors for a court procession, and the air is so thick with perfume you feel it settle on your tongue. Orange blossom, musk, violet, jasmine, animal fat, resin, civet. The combinations are dizzying, and every person here is wearing a different blend. Some light and floral, others heavy and dark like incense. You walk beside a marquise whose gloves are soaked in lily oil. She occasionally lifts them to her face and inhales, not because she enjoys the scent, but to block out everything else. You follow suit, raising your sachet to your nose like a mask. Even the palace architecture reflects this obsession. Hidden vents in certain rooms release bursts of scented air. Cinnamon in the winter, rose in the summer. Special wood chips are burned in the fireplaces, chosen not for heat but for fragrance. Bouquets of dried herbs hang near windows to ward off bad vapours. And of course, courtiers carry fans, elaborate tools of scent warfare. A single flick, and a plume of orange and myrrh strikes like a silent weapon across the nose. Not all scents are pleasant. Some nobles lean toward intensity rather than elegance. You pass a count whose cologne smells of tar and clove. Another reeks of camphor and stale wine, but no one says anything. To comment on someone's scent is to comment on their status, their hygiene, their health. It's practically a duel. There are whispers, of course. You hear one lady murmur that a certain duchess's perfume smells like a sick room. Another complains her rival reeks of funeral flowers. It's all coded language, subtle insults laced with politeness. As the morning wears on, your head swims with it all. The scents, the silence, the effort. A servant offers a bowl of fresh herbs to cleanse your hands. You reach in and rub rosemary between your palms. It's sharp, almost medicinal. You breathe in, grateful for something that smells clean without the illusion. But that moment is brief. A bell rings, the crowd shifts, and once again you're swept back into the perfumed machinery of Versailles. By midday your senses are overwhelmed, not by noise nor heat, but by scent. Everything smells like something. Nothing smells like itself. Your clothes smell of orris root and lemon, your hands of rosemary and smoke. Even the pages of the letter you receive from a fellow courtier are faintly tinted with bergamot. You sit beneath a tall window, sipping watered wine, and observe how everyone at court is constantly tending to their noses. One nobleman carries a glove in each hand, alternating between them like nostril sentinels. A lady nearby presses a pomander ball to her chin as she chats, as if afraid the conversation alone might expose her to a bad odour. You begin to see how Versailles has turned scent into a language, one more nuanced and powerful than speech. A certain perfume indicates marital status, another signals grief. One particular blend, known to contain civet and rosewood, has become shorthand for political ambition. You've heard whispers that the Queen herself favours a mixture of violet and ambergris, an expensive and animal-derived scent that requires the intestinal secretion of sperm whales. And yet, that very substance is praised as the height of elegance. At court, the rarer the ingredient, the more desirable the result. A perfume made from crushed pearl and deer musk is considered worth more than gold. Not because it smells better, often it doesn't, but because it speaks to access, to status, to knowledge of the unspoken codes. You're offered a bottle by a fellow courtier. Essence of night-blooming jasmine, he says, best worn after sunset. You dab a little at your throat. It burns faintly, too much alcohol in the base, but you smile and murmur approval. That's the game. You pass a servant polishing the banister with a rag soaked in scented vinegar. He doesn't speak, but the smell of thyme and lemon trails after him like a signature. Even the cleaning materials must carry fragrance, otherwise the illusion might crack. You begin to notice the palace itself has zones of scent. The Queen's chambers, powdery and floral. The King's wing, heavier, amber, smoke, musk. The chapel smells of wax and lilies. The kitchens reek of meat, fat and sweat, though even there someone has tried to hide it with bundles of dried herbs tied to the beams. And then there are the bad pockets. Certain corners, unused stairwells, behind the curtain alcoves where perfume cannot reach. You walk past one such spot and are hit by a wall of damp plaster, old fabric, and the unmistakable sharpness of human waste. You raise your sachet quickly, but the smell lingers, caught in your throat, in the back of your nose, in your memory. Back in your chamber that evening, you undress slowly, your hands moving through layers still damp with the day's sweat and perfume. You remove your shoes and pause. Your stockings emit a sour scent of vinegar and feet. You sprinkle them with dried mint as you've seen others do, and lay them by the hearth to air. Before bed, you anoint your pillow with a few drops of lavender oil. It's not about relaxation, it's about control. Even in sleep, Versailles must smell correct. As you close your eyes, the night air carries in a distant mix of roses, mould and horses. You drift off anyway. Because here, your body might ache, your breath might stink, your skin might crawl, but your scent must always be perfect. You're used to the glitter now. The crush of perfume, the rustle of silk, the delicate lies worn like rouge across every cheek. But today curiosity gets the better of you. You slip through a half-open panel behind the gallery of battles, a hidden passage, and suddenly the entire rhythm of Versailles changes. The air is cooler here, still heavy but less rehearsed. You're in the servants' wing. Gone are the gold-framed mirrors and tapestries. The walls here are bare, the floors plain wood, worn thin in the middle from countless hurried feet. You can hear them before you see them. Footsteps, murmurs, the soft clink of brass against stone. A door swings open and you're hit with the scent of hot cloth, oil, and something sour. Not rot. Effort. You step aside as a boy barely 15 rushes past with a bundle of stained linens clutched to his chest. Behind him, a laundress wrings out sheets over a stone basin, her sleeves rolled to her elbows, fingers red and raw. The water sloshes brown as she works in silence. You realise you've never thought about where the soiled linens go after nobles sleep in them, sweat in them, bleed on them. But here they are, and someone, dozens of someones, is tasked with scrubbing away the truth. Further down the passage you come upon a narrow room filled with steam. Shirts hang from wooden racks overhead, dripping into shallow troughs below. 2 men in aprons tend to copper kettles, boiling cloth in water laced with lye and wood ash. The smell is sharp, clean in a way that feels almost foreign after so many days of perfume and powder. One of them glances at you and laughs. Lost, are you? He doesn't wait for an answer. Don't worry, they all get curious eventually. Just watch your step. Some of these floors bite. You continue on, passing rows of benches lined with stockings turned inside out, gloves stuffed with crumpled paper to keep their shape, and undergarments so thin and worn, you wonder how many times they've been patched instead of replaced. A girl no older than 12 sits quietly with a brush, scraping wax off a gentleman's waistcoat, muttering to herself as she works. Her fingers move fast, practiced, without pride. It becomes clear. For every powdered wig you've admired, for every perfumed hem you've envied, there's a servant crouched somewhere, scrubbing at the stain it left behind. In a back hallway you catch a glimpse of the scullery maids hauling buckets of waste, human, animal, and otherwise. Some are headed for the dumping trenches at the edge of the grounds. Others are destined for reuse. Yes, reuse. In Versailles, even filth has hierarchy. Chamber pot contents are sometimes collected for use in tanning leather, dyeing fabric, or even, ironically, cleaning stained marble. One servant offers you a rag to cover your nose. You take it without hesitation. They do not wear wigs. They do not wear rouge. Their uniforms are simple, coarse fabric, stained aprons, hair tied back. And yet, you notice something strange. Many of them smell cleaner than the nobles they serve. You follow the sound of footsteps deeper into the labyrinth. The further you go, the more Versailles begins to feel like a city beneath a city. A shadow version of the palace where no one smiles and no one wears silk. Here, the work is constant. The cleaning never ends. But the irony is unmistakable. The ones who smell of soap and sweat are considered unrefined, while those who cake themselves in powder and paint are praised for elegance. In a narrow linen room, several servants stand shoulder to shoulder, folding sheets that steam faintly with the scent of lye. They work without speaking, their hands moving in rhythm. The cloth is still damp and heavy, and the air is thick with the smell of boiled cotton. One man pauses to wipe his brow, then returns to his folding like a machine. You notice a row of worn brushes by the door, not for shoes but for cleaning lace. Delicate cuffs, cravats and collars are gently scrubbed with chalk paste and lemon rind to preserve their whiteness without soaking them. They're dried on wooden racks stretched into shape. You pick one up. It's still damp, and it smells faintly of sweat masked by vinegar. The illusion of purity is painstaking to maintain. Beyond the laundry, you find yourself in the dressing corridor where valets and maids prepare garments for their masters. A young woman is ironing a waistcoat using a metal press heated in the coals. Each press must be tested first on a scrap of cloth to avoid burning the expensive fabric. Her hands are red, her eyes rimmed with fatigue. She hasn't slept much, you can tell, but the waistcoat is flawless. Across the hall, a valet is dusting a wig, patting it gently with powder from a muslin bag. The wig, despite its appearance, is weeks old. He adjusts the ribbon, smooths a curl, and sprays it with a light mist of rosewater mixed with spirits. "Just enough to fool the nose," he murmurs. He looks up and sees you watching. "They wear these like armour," he says, "but I know what's underneath." A narrow stairwell leads you down one more level, to the storage chambers where waste is sorted. Buckets of ashes stand next to crates of dried herbs. A pot of urine collected from the privies sits labelled for laundry use. It's old knowledge, they say. Soaking linen in stale urine before washing helps break up oil and stains. You think of the Queen's handkerchiefs, the King's bed linens. You wonder how many noble backs have lain against cloth cleaned in what their own bodies expelled. A cart rattles past you, pushed by a boy not much older than 14. On it are 2 chamber pots lined with linen. One is cracked at the rim, its contents sloshing dangerously with each wheel bump. The boy whistles softly, like he's learned not to hear or smell anything. You step aside. You re-emerge into the grand corridors later that afternoon, blinking at the sudden brightness and opulence, the polished floors, the laughter, the perfume. No one here knows where you've been, or if they do, they don't ask. You pass a duchess adjusting her gloves, her smile polite, her scent a bouquet of jasmine and forgetfulness, and you smile back, because now you know the truth she's standing on. You've returned to the marble halls of Versailles, your face powdered, your gloves scented, your posture rehearsed. But after what you've seen behind the curtains and beneath the floors, the illusion feels thinner now, like a fresh coat of paint over damp wood. So when a well-dressed gentleman approaches and offers you a smile bright enough to blind, you're already bracing for what lies beneath it. "Care to join me in the salon?" he asks. "We're discussing tooth powders." You follow, curious. The room is softly lit, hung with silk and filled with the smell of citrus and cloves. The nobles here recline in gilded chairs, sipping sweet wine, nibbling candied fruits, and grinning, quite literally, as they compare their dental regimens. It's a strange kind of boasting, each person eager to name the rarest, oddest, or most expensive method they've used to keep their teeth white. "I use powdered coral," says one marquise, showing a faintly pink smile, mixed with a touch of burnt honeycomb. A duke counters with his own mixture, ground oyster shell and sage ash, stored in a silver box and applied with a badger hair brush. "Nothing polishes better," he claims. But then a viscount leans forward, lowering his voice. "I've used urine." There's a pause, then laughter, not shock, not disgust, just amusement. Because here, nothing is too strange if it serves the purpose of preservation. The use of stale urine, preferably from a child, some whisper, is well documented among the elite. It's known to whiten teeth and remove stains, especially when mixed with salt and rubbed along the gums. You wonder how many of the flawless smiles you've admired at court were born of such rituals. Someone offers you a dab of tooth powder on a bit of linen. You try it. Gritty, bitter, with a sting that lingers. Your gums tingle, and a faint taste of ash rises at the back of your throat. You smile politely and nod. Effective, you say. What no one mentions is that most of these remedies also destroy the enamel. Cracked teeth, blackened gums, and chronic pain are common beneath the surface. But as long as one can smile through it, no one cares. In fact, you soon learn that a noble's breath is more important than their health. Clove oil is rubbed on the tongue, mint leaves are chewed. Some even carry small boxes of perfumed cotton to press against the roof of the mouth before a conversation. It's not about hygiene, It's about offence management. You're not supposed to be healthy. You're supposed to smell like you are. Later, you're invited to witness the Queen's own dental ritual. Her physician wears gloves and uses a swan's feather dipped in wine vinegar to clean between her teeth. A mirror is held up at the perfect angle so she can inspect her own smile. She nods, satisfied, even as the feather comes back pink from her bleeding gums. No one reacts. Blood is not shameful. But bad breath? That would be ruin. You begin to understand. At Versailles, health is silent. Scent is king. And nothing, not even pain, is allowed to disrupt the portrait. You swish with wine before dinner, press a dried clove to your tongue, and smile at your reflection. The corner of one tooth is cracked. You turn slightly so it won't show. Dinner that night is a spectacle, as always. Candles burn by the 100, casting gold across crystal and polished silver. The smell of roasted meat and candied fruit hangs in the air, but underneath it, always, is the scent of bodies, breath, and something sour that not even the cloves can conquer. You're seated beside a countess who smiles at you with remarkable confidence. Her teeth are nearly white, though the enamel is uneven, and her gums recede in sharp lines. She leans in to share a joke, and her breath carries the unmistakable mix of fennel and wine vinegar, one of the more popular courtly mouth rinses. Across the table, a viscount chews thoughtfully on a sliver of candied citrus peel. Not for pleasure, but because it leaves a clean scent behind. Between courses, many nobles do the same, placing small wafers of scented pastes beneath their tongues, even smearing rose jelly onto their teeth to mask decay. It's more art than science, and more theatre than truth. You take a sip of water from a crystal glass. It tastes faintly metallic. Some say they mix it with crushed pearls or powdered silver for its cleansing properties, though it likely does more harm than good. Others rinse with diluted wine or even champagne. Anything, really, to avoid the risk of plain water, which many still believe spreads illness. A man to your left dabs his lips after a bite of pâté and lifts a small brass box to his nose. Inside is a tiny sponge soaked in lavender spirit and clove oil. He breathes in deeply, eyes fluttering shut for a moment, before returning to conversation. You do the same with your sachet. The habit feels natural now. When the fish course arrives, a subtle tension ripples across the table. Fish is considered dangerous for the breath. It's rich, oily, and difficult to disguise with herbs. Some guests eat only a bite, then reach for a clove-studded orange pomander, holding it to their face like a mask. You follow suit. The most revealing moment comes with dessert. The sugar sticks to your teeth, clings to your tongue, creeps into the cracks, yet everyone smiles more broadly than ever. Sweet teeth are fashionable, a decayed tooth here or there, acceptable. But foul breath, never. A lady excuses herself and returns moments later with visibly fresher lips and a faint trace of mint. No one mentions her absence. She's done what's required. Later, as the guests drift into salons for music and cards, you pass by a servant collecting wine glasses. One is stained with rouge and something else, dark like dried blood. He wipes it with a cloth and sets it aside for reuse. You pause. The glasses aren't washed between courses, just wiped. The same goes for the cutlery. Another quiet truth no one speaks of. Before retiring, you're offered a toothpick carved from ivory and soaked in vinegar. You take it, carefully cleaning between your teeth in the dim candlelight. You wince as it catches a tender spot near your molar. You ignore it. The smile must remain untouched. You rinse with diluted brandy, spit into a bowl, and catch a glimpse of pink. Your gums are bleeding too now, but the next morning no one will know. They'll see your powdered cheeks, your gentle bow, and your smile, and they'll believe it. The next morning brings the scent of damp linen and crushed lavender, drifting under your chamber door before your valet even knocks. It's laundry day at Versailles, one of the rare ones, and the palace is buzzing. Not with energy, but with tension. Because at court, even cleaning a sheet is political. You dress quickly, stepping into stockings still faintly scented from yesterday's rosewater foot rinse. They're not truly clean, just aired near the hearth. Your valet shakes out your shirt, stiff with starch and smelling faintly of lye, then layers your waistcoat on top. The air is thicker today. The laundresses have begun boiling linens before dawn, and the scent of ash, soapwort and ammonia now drifts through the palace like the ghost of forgotten purity. You're invited to observe the Queen's linen inspection, a curious tradition that functions less like household management and more like a theatrical display of control. In a private chamber just off her dressing room, a pile of folded sheets is laid out on a long mahogany table. Each piece is monogrammed, embroidered, and faintly yellowed in places. But to say so aloud would be rude. Even the Queen's undergarments are presented as if they've never touched a human body. A steward gestures to one of the sheets and remarks, "This one has been refreshed 3 times this month." Refreshed, not washed, a euphemism. In most cases, linens are not scrubbed in water. Instead, they're rubbed with scented vinegar, aired in the sun, and dusted with crushed herbs. Actual washing with boiling lye is reserved for severe cases, stains too dark to ignore, or rumours too loud to outpace. You touch the fabric. It's brittle at the corners, the lace fraying from too much perfume and not enough care. You notice faint brown smudges pressed deep into the weave. Sweat. Possibly worse, but no one speaks of it. A maid steps forward with a fresh cloth and begins to rub one corner gently with wine and chalk paste. The stain lightens. The steward nods approvingly. Another day's illusion maintained. Behind a screen, 2 laundresses kneel beside a brass tub, scrubbing pillowcases with stiff bristled brushes. The water is already grey, the bubbles gone. They whisper to each other as they work, glancing occasionally toward the nobles who pretend not to hear. One lifts a shirt, fine linen, ruffled and unmistakably royal, and holds it up to the light. It's been patched twice, and a faint yellow ring shows at the collar. "Best we can do," she murmurs. You step away and wander down the gallery toward the linen storeroom, where servants are laying out drying cloth on wooden racks. The scent is strong, sun-warmed cotton, boiled soap and the tang of vinegar. Here, at least, cleanliness feels more honest. No perfume, no powder, just fabric stripped bare of illusion. You overhear a valet complain that the king's nightshirt is still damp from yesterday's rinse and smells too much like effort. He'll perfume it before it's returned to the royal chamber. The king must never be reminded that others sweat, let alone himself. As you linger near the storage racks, you notice something strange. Certain linens are folded separately, set apart in shallow wicker baskets with dried rosemary tucked between them. A maid sees your gaze and explains, "These are for the ambassadors." You raise an eyebrow. "Special protocol," she adds. "They must believe the king sleeps in fresh sheets every night." You nod, though you now know the truth. Most of the royal linens are refreshed, not laundered, rubbed with spirits, shaken in the air, then reperfumed and pressed into shape. Still, the illusion of purity must be absolute when foreign eyes are watching, especially the bed sheets. You pass into a narrower corridor and nearly stumble over a pair of linen boys crouched beside a pile of undergarments. They sort by eye. Some are tossed into a basket marked for boiling, others into a bin labelled light rinse. You glance down. A chemise lies crumpled and damp at your feet, with a faint reddish stain along the hem. Neither boy touches it. "No time for blood today," one mutters. "Too much lace to starch." You step around it and move on. Back near the royal wing, preparations are underway to change the king's bedding. This happens infrequently, not daily, not even weekly. When it does occur, the ceremony is as precise as a ballet. 4 servants enter, gloved, each holding a corner of the sheet. It's folded with such care you'd think it were parchment, not fabric. Another carries a vial of perfume, neroli and amber diluted in rosewater. He sprinkles it across the mattress straw before the clean linen is lowered, lest the scent of human sleep remain too strong. The straw itself is rarely changed. It's simply beaten flat and spritzed. Some say it hasn't been replaced in years, but the scent is always fresh. That's what matters. As the bed is dressed, you watch a senior valet smooth the top sheet with the back of his hand. His palm never touches the fabric. Then he steps back and nods. No visible stains, no wrinkles. Success. A perfumed pillow is placed at the head. You recognise the lace trim. It was being scrubbed this morning. The scent of lavender lingers faintly beneath the starch, the smell of labour hidden under nobility. Later that evening, as you pass the Queen's chambers, you catch sight of a servant emerging with an armful of what appears to be underclothes bundled tightly in linen wraps. A drop falls from the hem. Not water. She doesn't look at you. She simply turns down the corridor and disappears into the wall of the palace, where smells are managed, not discussed. That night, back in your own chamber, you pull the sheets over your shoulders and take a slow breath. The fabric smells faintly of thyme and ash. Not unpleasant, not clean, just faint. A ghost of hygiene. You wonder how many bodies have slept in this bed. How many nights these sheets have absorbed secrets, stains, heat. And how many times they've been refreshed, but never truly washed. You close your eyes and try to forget the damp hem on the floor. The next morning you rise with a strange sensation. Not quite sickness, not quite fatigue, but something heavy, as though the very air has grown tired. You sit up slowly, listening. The usual footsteps in the corridor, the distant clatter of trays, the soft coughs of maids behind walls. Everything feels muffled. The palace is quiet in a way that makes you uneasy. You step into the hallway and follow the scent of smoke and damp stone. Something is different today. The usual layers of perfume have thinned. The flowers in the vases along the gallery are wilting. Even the candlelight seems less golden. You ask a passing valet, "Is something wrong?" He hesitates. "They're cleaning," he says. You blink. "The palace?" He nods grimly, as if the word itself were unpleasant. And so, for the first time since your arrival, you witness what happens when Versailles tries to cleanse itself. It is not elegant. The sweeping begins in the salons first. Dust dragged from under the carpets and into the corners by heavy brooms. Most of the furniture is too fragile to move, so servants work around it, brushing along the legs, knocking gently into gilt. They wipe with dry cloths, not water, never water, and sprinkle scented powder across the floor to mask the odour that cleaning unleashes. Every movement lifts the smell of old shoes, forgotten food, stale breath, and spilled wine from the fibres. In the antechambers, tapestries are beaten, once, maybe twice. They release a fog of dust, insects and powder that coats everything in sight. The workers wear kerchiefs over their mouths. You cover your nose with your sleeve. It doesn't help. You slip into a side room where a maid is scraping candle wax from the marble floor with a knife. She doesn't look up as you enter. "It never comes off clean," she mutters. "Not after this long." Her hands are grey with soot, her apron blackened. You continue through the palace, past rooms with open windows. This is rare. Versailles is not built for air. But today, shutters are wide, curtains pinned back. The breeze stirs years of perfume, smoke and sweat into something almost unbearable. It's not fresh, it's chaos. The walls themselves seem to exhale. In the king's private library you watch as two servants polish a writing desk with a rag soaked in brandy and lavender. One opens a drawer and recoils. You don't ask what's inside. She shuts it again quickly and begins humming, as if the sound can erase the smell. The mirrors are left untouched, too fragile, too prized. Their surfaces remain hazy with the breath of 1,000 courtly conversations and the oily fingerprints of gloved hands. You trace one with your finger. The smear it leaves looks like a wound. In the hall of mirrors, a team of workers mops the marble tiles with cloths tied to their feet, sliding and scuffing as they go. The smell of vinegar rises like steam. You watch one slip and catch himself on a column, leaving a sweaty handprint against the gold. It will not be wiped away, because this is not a cleaning meant to purify. It's a cleaning meant to pretend. As the day wears on, the effort to scrub Versailles into civility becomes more frantic and more futile. The palace resists cleaning the way an old tree resists pruning. For every stain removed, two more appear under sunlight. For every scent masked, another rises from behind the walls. In the Queen's gallery, a servant is scraping a dark patch from beneath a chaise with a flat bone knife. He doesn't speak, but the way he shifts his weight and keeps glancing over his shoulder tells you he's cleaning something that shouldn't be mentioned. A spill, a stain, a secret. He works until it smears, then disappears behind a tapestry. Further down, another team is scrubbing the baseboards with cloth soaked in turpentine. The scent is sharp, medicinal. You cough as you pass. A maid offers you a piece of linen soaked in rosemary and spirits to hold against your face. You accept, press it gently to your nose. It burns a little. Better that than what's behind the curtains. They've opened the servants' stairwells today, letting the rot of weeks or years drift upward into noble spaces. You catch one lady gagging quietly near a side window. Her maid hands her a sachet and a fan. "Breathe through the violet," she murmurs. "It's almost over." It's not. In one hallway, you pass a mound of discarded slippers and gloves, each one stained, faded, reeking faintly of mildew. They will be cleaned. They will be sorted, some salvaged with perfume and new stitching, others simply burned at the edge of the estate under cover of night. You stop in a small salon that once hosted card games. The furniture has been pulled aside. On the bare floor, the pattern of dust and grime outlines where people sat, stood, spilled. A footman walks in with a mop soaked in citrus oil and begins scrubbing in long arcs, erasing outlines of lives no longer present. Someone has broken open a window in the east corridor, and for a moment you catch a true breath. Cold air, faint with the scent of rain and trees from the woods beyond the palace. It's dizzying in its honesty. You pause there, greedily filling your lungs. Then a hand gently pulls the window shut again. "We're not meant to smell outside," says a maid, smiling politely as she latches it closed. In the grand staircase, the perfume has returned in full force. Servants spray diluted musk into the air, swinging their arms like dancers. The effect is immediate. The palace begins to forget. The sour scent of damp fabric is replaced by cloves. The sweat in the corners smells faintly of orange blossom. The mirrors gleam, not because they're clean, but because the light has shifted. You stand among it all, feeling the weight of the day settle on your skin like the dust that never truly left. Your own clothes feel heavier now. Perfume clings, but your nose is too tired to respond. You can still smell the wax in your hairline, the vinegar in your sleeves. As evening falls, Versailles breathes in again. It has covered its tracks. The stains are still there, but now they shine. By now, you've begun to notice an odd contradiction at the heart of Versailles. The more powerful the room, the fewer the privies. You'd think a palace designed to house a king and hundreds of nobles would be dotted with elegant private chambers for such human necessities. But it isn't. In fact, the higher you climb in rank, the more absurd the accommodations become. You're invited to attend a meeting of the King's Privy Council. An ironic name, given that there's nothing private about it. The ministers gather in an ornate salon surrounded by oil paintings and the scent of stale velvet. Important matters of state are discussed here. Laws are shaped. Lives are altered. And yet, if nature calls during the meeting, there is no chamber down the hall, no private room with marble and mirrors. Instead, there is a curtain. You don't believe it at first. But then a count rises from his chair, clears his throat, steps behind a hanging tapestry near the window, and relieves himself into a gilt-handled chamber pot perched on a stool. You hear it. Everyone hears it. But no one blinks. The moment passes. The curtain sways gently. The Count returns to his seat, adjusts his cravat and resumes discussion of a land tax in Brittany. You can't look away from the stool. Later, during a quieter moment in the hall, you ask a steward if this is normal. He shrugs. They'd rather do it here than walk to the servants' wing. But isn't that unsanitary, you ask? He looks puzzled. That's what the curtain is for. You say nothing. As you move through other wings of the palace, the pattern repeats. Behind nearly every curtain, partition, or strategically placed screen, there's a pot. Some are porcelain, others brass, a few covered in faded embroidery. Most are used regularly, and many are emptied irregularly. The smell varies, faint, strong, sour, but always present. In the salons where gambling takes place late into the night, you spot men casually standing behind columns or near drapery, murmuring excuses before disappearing for a moment. A servant lingers nearby, ready to remove the pot without drawing attention. He carries it in a velvet-lined box like a sacred object. And here's the strangest part. The nobles consider actual bathrooms vulgar. To designate a room solely for relief is, to them, an admission of the body's needs. Uncivilized, peasant-like. Far better to conceal the function behind artful furniture and subtle drapery. You pass a chaise with a hollowed-out base and a cushioned lid. It looks inviting, until you realise it too is a disguised commode. Even the king's own privy, if it can be called that, is a small closet-like alcove beside his bedchamber, guarded not by locks but by layers of etiquette. Only one servant is permitted to assist. The pot is gold-rimmed, the cushion velvet and the curtain thick. But it is still just a stool in a corner. You ask a courtier why this hasn't changed. Because, he says, sipping wine, Versailles is about appearances. A room for relieving oneself would ruin the illusion. You look around, at the paintings, the candlelight, the silk, and the curtain still swaying. Once you notice the curtains, you start seeing them everywhere, fluttering softly in the breeze, concealing 100 quiet acts no one dares speak of. Even the most refined chambers of Versailles, with their gold leaf and muralled ceilings, have their hidden corners, and what lies behind them isn't shameful. It's expected. In one drawing room, you observe a lady excuse herself mid-conversation. She doesn't leave the chamber. She steps behind a velvet partition beside the harpsichord. Moments later, she emerges composed, her perfume refreshed, her posture unbroken. A servant silently appears to carry away the used pot in a wooden case shaped like a writing box. You realise this happens dozens of times a day, and always in silence. You pass through the king's hunting wing and see a similar arrangement. A small bench, ornately carved, with a seat that lifts. It's placed directly beneath a tapestry of Diana, goddess of the hunt. The irony doesn't seem to trouble anyone. The truth becomes undeniable. Versailles, for all its scale and ceremony, was never built to accommodate the human body. It was built to stage it, to showcase it, but never to admit that it needs. The idea of constructing fixed latrines or washing rooms was considered both unnecessary and perhaps worse, inelegant. There are few official facilities, rare and tucked far into the servant corridors. They're dark, often windowless, lined with cold stone and streaked with years of neglect. Buckets overflow, doors don't close, the smell is sharp and lingering. You wonder if anyone of rank has ever stepped foot in them. Most nobles never would. Why should they, when they have screens and silence? Yet the system has its flaws. At night, the palace quiets, but it does not rest. Servants with lanterns walk the halls collecting pots, slipping through passages with brass vessels sloshing under lids. One spills near the staircase. He kneels to scrub it with brandy and cloth, praying no one sees. You see. He glances up at you, eyes hollow, resigned. He knows you won't report him. You both understand. Versailles breathes through these rituals. You take a different staircase that evening, passing through a music salon where someone's dog has made a mess on the rug. No one cleans it. They just cover it with a footstool and carry on with the lute performance. Even the palace gardens reflect this denial. Statues of Roman gods lift their arms in noble poses, while the hedges nearby bear the marks of last night's convenience. In the moon grove, you step on something soft beneath your heel and don't look down. By now you've trained yourself to glide over it all, to hold your breath in the corners, to step wide near the curtains, to pretend that the hand-carved stool isn't warm from use. You learn to smile politely at someone who's just returned from behind a screen. Because at Versailles, dignity is a performance, cleanliness is a whisper, and privacy is merely a curtain. This morning you're summoned not by a valet but by a royal physician's assistant, a young man in crisp linen with the faint scent of camphor clinging to his cuffs. His lordship requests your presence, he says quietly. He's unwell. You follow, intrigued, not with concern but with curiosity, because at Versailles illness reveals another layer of ritual, one more intimate and more bizarre than any you've yet seen. The nobleman in question is reclined on a velvet chaise in a private chamber, curtains drawn, sunlight dimmed. His wig has been removed, revealing patchy hair and a faint rash at the temples. He waves you in weakly with a scented handkerchief. "Just a touch of bile imbalance," he murmurs. "They're bleeding me at noon." You blink. You weren't expecting that. Moments later, the physician arrives, powdered, poised, and already pulling on gloves. A basin is prepared, a silver lancet laid on a napkin. No one flinches. You sit in a corner as the nobleman extends his arm with the same grace he'd offer at a waltz. The physician feels for a vein, then draws the blade across the skin. Blood wells up, dark and slow. Into the bowl it goes, 3 ounces, maybe 4. The nobleman winces but does not protest. "It's to draw out the heat," he says, his face pale. This, you learn, is hygiene at Versailles. Not with water, not with soap, but with blood. The body is believed to hold 4 humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Balance is everything. Too much of one causes illness. And the cure? Remove it. Bleeding, leeches, emetics, enemas. You watch as the physician presents a cloth soaked in vinegar and rosemary to the nobleman's nose. It's to keep his vapours aligned. Beside the basin, a maid arrives with a fresh shirt and towel. The blood-stained linen will be soaked in cold water, then sent down to the laundress for assessment. If the stain doesn't lift, it may be discarded, though not without debate. Linen is expensive. The procedure ends with a sip of spiced wine and a pat of the wrist. The nobleman reclines again. Much improved, he says, though his lips are white and trembling. Later, you're taken to observe the Queen's physician in her antechamber. She's not ill, only restless, so she's being cleansed. Her pulse is checked, her urine examined, her skin brushed with stiff horsehair to stimulate circulation. The maid explains this dry brushing is part of her weekly routine, meant to purge the body through the skin. Real baths are still considered risky, especially for women. Better to bleed lightly or sweat deliberately than to risk soaking. In the hallway, you pass a cart of leeches, glass jars filled with murky water and tiny black creatures pulsing gently against the glass. They're used often, especially in summer, for headaches, for tension, for vague complaints that words can't quite name. No one questions it. The king himself is said to submit to bleeding before major speeches to maintain calm. You begin to wonder how many nobles walk these halls at half strength, drained weekly for appearance's sake. How many speak softly because they're light-headed? How many smiles are tight with fatigue, not politeness? You pass a salon where 2 women are discussing a recent illness cured, they say, by 12 leeches and a lavender poultice. She nearly fainted, one says proudly, so you know it worked. At Versailles, the paler your skin, the more purified your blood, the cleaner you're believed to be, even if you feel like collapsing. That afternoon you find yourself summoned once more, not to a salon or banquet, but to an enclosed chamber known only by whispers, la salle de lavement, the enema room. Yes, there is one. And no, it isn't hidden. In fact, at Versailles, it's rather fashionable. A noble woman you've spoken to before, charming, elegant, always powdered just so, has invited you to witness what she calls her weekly purification. You hesitate. She smiles. Don't be shy. Everyone does it. You step inside the room, and it is beautiful. That's the first surprise. Pale green walls, a fresco of nymphs along the ceiling, golden sconces shaped like vines, but in the centre stands a plush velvet chair with a hole in the seat and a porcelain bowl beneath it, rimmed in gold. Beside it, a maid is preparing the tools, a warmed mixture of milk, honey and water, a long silver-tipped syringe, a linen cloth scented with rose oil. It's quiet, almost reverent. The noblewoman reclines, lifts her skirts, and allows the procedure to begin as if she were merely having her hair pinned. You sit in stunned silence, unsure where to look. She hums softly. The maid is discreet, efficient. A second servant fans the air with a sprig of rosemary. Afterwards, she sips fennel tea and offers you a mint. I find it settles the mood, she says. This, you come to learn, is not a rarity. Enemas are fashionable, necessary even. A well-regarded noble is expected to cleanse not only their speech, their skin, and their breath, but their very bowels. Twice a week is standard. Daily, if one is particularly visible at court. You hear stories of nobles who travel with their own syringes, gold inlaid and custom engraved. The king himself is said to have a personal physician whose sole task is to oversee his internal balance. It's whispered that he receives over 200 enemas a year, and the court loves him for it. Outside, in the larger corridors, you begin to pick up on subtle clues. The faint scent of anise or fennel lingering behind someone, the loose gait of a newly cleansed marquis, a page boy carrying a discreet cloth-wrapped bundle to the side chambers. You no longer wonder, you know. At dinner the subject arises with casual flair. Chamomile or mint today? Someone asks with a smirk. Oh, chamomile, comes the reply, always before dessert. The table laughs, but no one finds it absurd. It's Versailles. The most powerful men and women in Europe speak of enemas as if they were perfumes. They're prescribed for headaches, melancholy, digestive upset, political tension, bad dreams. A good flush is said to brighten the skin, sharpen the mind, and improve the temper. One man claims he took one before every council meeting. Keeps the blood light, he says, swirling his wine. You note the way he shifts in his seat. By the end of the evening, you find yourself offered a pouch of senna leaves to steep in your chamber, just in case. You accept it. Because refusal implies disinterest in one's own refinement, and that is the one thing Versailles cannot forgive. Later, as you undress by candlelight, you think of the golden syringe, of the perfumed steam, of the painted ceilings above people mid-procedure. You think of how far they go not to appear mortal, and you wonder, if cleanliness is next to godliness, then what exactly is Versailles trying to become? You awaken the next morning to the sound of splashing water, a rare sound at Versailles. It's not your basin, it's louder, more deliberate. Curious, you slip on your robe and step into the corridor, following the noise down a narrow hallway rarely used by nobles. You pass 2 valets carrying towels and what smells like warmed rose milk. Then you realise what day it is. It's bath day. Not yours, of course. You haven't truly bathed since arriving. But for some members of the court, usually the elderly, the unwell, or the obsessively fashionable, today is a ceremonial bathing day. It doesn't happen often. Water is still considered dangerous by most, but a handful of nobles believe in the ritual. Done properly, with herbs, heat, and plenty of perfume, it is seen as a sign of elite control over the body. You've been invited to witness one such scene. The bathing room is tucked behind the Queen's gallery. Inside, a copper tub gleams in the candlelight, half filled with warm water infused with dried lavender, orange peel, and a splash of white wine. The room smells divine, like a citrus orchard in spring, but beneath it lies a trace of sour skin, faintly masked. A nobleman reclines in the bath, his wig removed, his body pale under the flickering light. 2 attendants stand by, one to ladle water, another to apply scented oils. A third holds a long-handled brush, unused for now. No one is scrubbing. Bathing here is not about cleaning. It's about soaking, releasing tension, softening the skin so that powders will adhere better. Washing is secondary. There is no soap. Instead, rose petals are rubbed gently along the arms. Then warm milk, mixed with honey, is poured along the shoulders and allowed to drip into the water. You sit quietly, watching the mixture swirl like cream in tea. The nobleman sips from a porcelain cup. Only every 2 weeks, he murmurs. Any more and the skin weakens. He lifts a leg and examines it critically. Though I fear I'll need a touch more starch on the calves tomorrow. His attendants nod solemnly. When the bath is over, he's helped out with care, draped in linen and dusted, not dried, but dusted, with orris root powder and crushed sandalwood. The idea is not to absorb moisture, but to perfume it. His skin shines faintly, not from cleanliness, but from oil. He does not look refreshed. He looks rehearsed. Elsewhere in the palace, you learn, some nobles bathe in more exotic concoctions. Goat's milk, violet water, diluted spirits, even broth. One countess is said to favour melted snow mixed with rose water, though no one dares ask where she stores the snow in July. It's all part of the performance. A true bath must be impractical, difficult, beautiful. You peek into another room where a tub has been prepared but never used. The water has cooled. The herbs float listlessly. A servant begins to drain it. She changed her mind, he says, felt the air was too damp. The tub will be scoured with vinegar, dried with cloths, and left empty until next month. Back in your own chamber, you look at your basin. It's cold, stale. Your cloth smells faintly of mildew. You wash your face anyway and rub your arms with lavender water. No bath for you. Not today. Not ever. Unless you fall ill. Or wealthy. At Versailles, bathing's a performance, and most of the cast never makes it to the stage. Later that day, you're drawn to a small music salon where a handful of nobles have gathered to listen to a young violinist. The room is dim, the air perfumed with ambergris and orange blossom, and the audience sits still, almost reverently. But as the bow glides across the strings, your attention drifts, not to the music, but to the smell. You're sitting beside a noblewoman recently returned from her ceremonial bath. Her skin glistens faintly with oil, and the heat of the room draws the scent out of her. Lavender, jasmine, a trace of honey. It's not unpleasant, but it mingles strangely with the sweat of the man on your other side, whose underarms have soaked through his silk coat. He hasn't bathed in weeks. You know because he said so proudly yesterday. This is the paradox of Versailles. Two people seated inches apart, one anointed like a statue of Venus, the other quietly fermenting beneath embroidery, and neither thinks the other strange. After the performance, a conversation sparks around the idea of natural perspiration. One baron insists that sweating regularly is a sign of good blood circulation, while another counters that sweating attracts miasmas and must be tightly controlled. The room splits evenly. One side fans themselves dramatically, the other dabs at their foreheads with rosewater cloths. You excuse yourself. In the corridor, you cross paths with a servant hauling a wooden tub, empty now. Water streaks still fresh along the rim. He's heading back to the bathroom, not for another guest, but for the tub itself. It must be cleaned with bread. Yes, bread. You follow, intrigued, and watch as the soft white of yesterday's loaves is pressed against the copper, absorbing oils and residue. Soap would corrode the finish. Bread, they say, is gentler, and so it's rubbed along the curves, folded around corners, and finally burned after use. You wonder how many mouths go hungry while bread scrubs the back of a marquee. In the same chamber, you see a wig drying by the hearth. A dressing maid sprinkles it with ground violet root and pats it gently into the curls. The dampness from bath steam must be erased quickly. Moisture ruins the powder's hold. Everything at Versailles, it seems, is in a delicate balance between dry and scented. Wetness is welcome only if it's disguised. Later, you overhear someone whisper about a duchess who bathed twice in 1 week. Reckless, they say. She'll wash the scents from her bones. It's not meant cruelly, it's worry. Because here, too much cleanliness is seen as weakness. Water invites illness. Fragrance shields against it. If you must wash, let it be with wine, milk, or oil. Things the body recognizes. Not water, which opens the pores, lets the bad air in. And so you learn to layer instead of cleanse. Powder over oil, linen over sweat, scent over rot. That night, you dab your temples with chamomile vinegar. You dust your pillow with lavender. You stretch beneath a coverlet that smells faintly of starch and rose. And as you drift to sleep, the idea of a true bath, cool, clean, silent, feels almost mythical, like something whispered about in poems but never actually done. Not here, not at Versailles. The next morning begins not with light, but with scent. Before your eyes even open, you smell it. Rosewater, cardamom, beeswax, a whisper of something musky. It lingers in your chamber like the memory of someone else's breath. The perfume hangs so thickly you wonder if someone has poured it directly onto the floorboards. You sit up and notice a fresh sachet placed beside your pillow. A gift from the Queen's perfumer, you're told later. For the morning knows, the maid says, smiling faintly. You've grown used to this now. The daily exchange of invisible armour, perfumer's shield, signature, confession and camouflage. But today you're invited to a more intricate ritual. Not a bath, not a feast, something quieter, but no less extravagant. You're going to the perfume workshop. It's tucked behind the Queen's wing. Beyond a set of carved doors no visitor dares open without invitation. Inside, the world changes. The air is warm, thick with spice. Glass jars line the shelves, some sealed with wax, others stoppered with corks. Each contains some treasured essence: powdered iris root, dried rose petals, clumps of ambergris, curls of sandalwood, shavings of tonka bean. A young man in fine but stained linen greets you. The Queen's neighs or knows. His job, as sacred as any minister's, is to craft her daily scent, not just to please, but to protect. Her Majesty's nerves are sensitive, he explains. Scents must change with the mood. Too much jasmine on a stormy day. A disaster. You watch him crush dried violet into a powder with the back of a silver spoon, then fold it carefully into a base of goose fat and tinctured alcohol. The result smells like memory, soft, dry, and oddly sorrowful. This, he says, is for her sleeves. He moves on to mix a tincture of myrtle, lemon rind, and civet. For the gloves, he murmurs, so her fingers don't smell like ink. You ask about the scent worn closest to her body. He smiles. That is the most delicate of all, worn just below the heart, and never, ever repeated. You pass a table filled with ceramic dishes containing solid perfumes, pomades made from herbs mashed into fat. One is labelled simply Rain, another First Sleep. These are not names, you realise, they're moods. Each member of the court who can afford it commissions their own blend. One noblewoman wears nothing but verbena and vinegar. A bishop prefers crushed orange peel with clove. The king's favourite, it's said, smells faintly of pine resin and warm leather. Each scent tells a story, hides another. But they're not always pleasant. In another room, you find the ingredients that make the illusions work. Musk from deer glands, castoreum scraped from beaver sacks, civet from the scent glands of wild cats. The smell is animal, musky, foul at first breath. But when diluted and layered, it becomes the base of elegance. Every whiff of royalty begins with something primal. The young Nez hands you a small jar. Inside, crushed lily mixed with powdered pearl and a whisper of burnt sugar. Try it, he says. You dab it on your wrist and wait. At first, it's nothing. Then, warmth. A faint powdery sweetness, like a letter sealed with breath. You say nothing. He nods, satisfied. This is Versailles, where nothing is quite as it seems, and everything that smells beautiful begins in rot. You leave the perfume chamber dazed, trailing scent like a royal ghost. The hallway seems sharper now. You notice how each noble who passes wears their aroma like a banner. Some leave a wake of citrus, others cinnamon or vinegar. One elderly count's cloak smells unmistakably of tobacco and mothballs, dusted over with iris root to disguise the truth. But then there's the other kind, the cloying, the overdone, the desperate. You pass a man who smells of so many layers, amber, rosemary, musk, violet, that your stomach turns before he even speaks. He nods politely. You struggle not to breathe. Not all scents are well chosen, and not all are welcome. In the salons, scent becomes strategy. A courtier spritzes his cravat discreetly during a conversation, an effort to regain focus, or perhaps to cover the garlic on his breath. A duchess drops her glove accidentally near a rival. It's heavily perfumed with a blend known to cause sneezing. A noble woman dabs perfume onto her letters so the king will recognise her presence before reading a single word. The court has no secrets, but every scent tells one. You're invited later that evening to a card game in the Salon de Jeu. As you enter, you're overwhelmed. Not by the smoke or the noise, but the perfume cloud. Layers of myrrh, bergamot, civet, rose and camphor collide in the candlelight. The very walls seem to pulse with it. You sit beside a viscount who smells faintly of crushed apple and wet wool. He dabs his forehead with a cloth steeped in rosemary spirit. then offers it to you. You take it, grateful. Across the table, a young chevalier wears no visible powder, but the musk around him is unmistakable, thick with animal warmth. It's not accidental. He catches you noticing, smiles. His teeth are stained with clove and wine. Halfway through the game, a lady excuses herself. No one asks why. She returns 10 minutes later smelling subtly different, lighter, cleaner. She has reapplied her perfume, reset her presence. At Versailles, this is what hygiene becomes, not a matter of cleanliness, but curation. You don't need to be clean. You need to smell intentional. You begin to develop your own routine, a base of lemon balm and orris, a midday dab of crushed thyme at the wrists, a clove in the mouth before formal meals, a sachet of wormwood and mint under your pillow at night to balance the breath. It works. Nobles begin to nod at you in passing. One compliments your scent, calls it thoughtful. That's the highest praise you've received in days. You notice something else now too. The absence of scent is alarming. A courtier who smells of nothing at all seems suspicious, ghost-like. It's assumed they're hiding illness, or worse, poverty. Even the sick wear perfume, especially the sick. At dinner, you catch the scent of death. Not dramatic, not putrid. Just a faint metallic sweetness beneath a layer of jasmine. The Marquis at the end of the table is smiling too brightly. His cheeks are too red. His collarbone trembles. You don't mention it. No one does. Later that night you rub a drop of lavender oil into your temple and stare into the mirror. You smell beautiful. You don't feel clean. The next morning you wake earlier than usual. The palace is quiet except for the distant creak of carts and the soft murmurs of servants already at work. Today you're not attending a salon or watching a bathing ritual. You've asked for something different. You want to see how the other half lives, not the nobility gliding through perfumed corridors, but the ones who make the gliding possible. You descend a narrow staircase behind the tapestry hall, stepping into a world you were never meant to see. Here the ceilings are lower. The walls are bare stone. The air is cooler, drier, and smells of starch, coal smoke, and something earthy. Soap made from tallow and ash. You enter the quarters where the lowest-ranking servants live and work. The scullery maids, footboys, laundresses, chamber sweepers. These people touch the things nobles pretend don't exist. Sweat, filth, rot, stains. And yet, as you pass by their rooms, something catches you off guard. They smell cleaner. You stop near the laundry yard and inhale, not perfume, not roses, not jasmine, but soap. Real, acrid, lie-heavy soap. A scent that stings your nose with honesty. Two maids are bent over a basin, scrubbing undergarments with boiling water and soapwort. Their sleeves rolled high, faces damp with steam. Their linens are rough, plain, undyed. But they're washed, actually washed. They work in silence, only pausing to slap garments against stones to beat out the filth. No sachets, no perfumes, no lavender water. Just lie, sweat, and purpose. You ask one of them how often she bathes. Once a week, she replies plainly, or twice if there's water left. She says it like someone stating the weather. No shame, no pride. Do you use perfume, you ask? She snorts. No point. If you're clean, you don't need to hide. The words hit harder than you expect. You follow her back into the servant quarters, passing a dormitory where young footboys are dousing their shirts in vinegar to kill lice. Another boy is plucking a dead beetle from his blanket and muttering under his breath. Their space is crowded but functional, a shared wash tub, a line of garments drying near a hearth. No powder, no scented sachets, just soap, vinegar, and heat. A woman brushes her teeth outside with a twig dipped in salt. She grins when she sees your expression. "Old way," she says, better than coral dust and burnt shell. You're not so sure she's wrong. In the scullery, you watch a cook scrub her hands with coarse sand and lemon peel. Her apron is stained, but her skin is cleaner than any powdered noble's glove. When she finishes, she dries her hands on a cloth that smells of sunlight and ash. You sit beside the fire and warm your hands, breathing in the smoke. It clings to your sleeves, your collar. You realize you'll be perfumed again within the hour, dusted, rinsed, scented until you smell like someone you're not. But for now, you let the scent of soap and ash settle into your clothes. It smells like truth, and it's the cleanest you've felt in days. Later that morning, you make your way back toward the gilded heart of the palace. The marble floors reappear. The air thickens. Perfume returns, curling under your nose like a ribbon. You pass through the same corridors as before, but they feel different now. Your senses are sharpened. You've smelled what clean truly is. Now, everything else reeks of cover-up. As you rejoin the nobles, their presence feels louder, not in speech, but in scent. A lady passes you in the corridor, her train dragging behind her like the tail of a scented comet. She smells of rose, vanilla, musk, and something vaguely medicinal. You catch a glimpse of powder on her neck, clinging unevenly to a fresh rash just beneath her jaw. Her maid follows discreetly, dabbing at the mark with a perfumed cloth, eyes downcast. You step into a parlour just as a footman finishes lighting the final candelabra. The heat of the flames releases yesterday's scents from the curtains: clove, sweat, smoke, and powdered starch. The room is beautiful, but it's like drinking perfume from a cup. It dazzles, then overwhelms. You take your seat beside a young nobleman whose gloves shine from oil and polish. His teeth gleam faintly behind red-stained lips. He leans in. You smell rustic, he says, with a hint of intrigue. You blink. It wasn't meant as an insult. You realize he's right. The smoke from the scullery fire still clings to your coat. The faint trace of soap remains beneath your cuffs. And compared to the sweetness of the air around you, you do smell different. But here's the twist. No one minds. In fact, they're curious. A countess leans closer and whispers, "You've been with the servants, haven't you?" She doesn't pull away. She inhales. Lye. Vinegar. How unexpected. In a court where everyone smells the same, difference has its own power. Soon others are asking what you've used. What blend? What formula? You lie and say it's a new French soap made from orange peel and sage ash. They nod approvingly, already planning to send for it. The irony strikes you hard. The servants who scrub stained linens with vinegar are cleaner than their masters, and now their scent is becoming fashionable. You excuse yourself and walk the outer halls, pausing by a window overlooking the stables. The wind carries the scent of horses, straw, and fresh dung. You don't flinch. After all the perfume, it almost smells honest. Near the servants' entrance, you watch a maid slip into the palace from the yard, her hair damp, apron clean. She carries a bucket of warm water, real water, and a cake of homemade soap. No one greets her, no one bows. But she is, for this moment, the cleanest person in Versailles. Back in your chamber, your valet offers you your usual sachet and glove powder. You wave it away. "Not today," you say. He hesitates, confused. You run a cloth over your collar and inhale. Still the faintest trace of ash and heat. You decide to keep it. Because for all the golden fountains and scented wigs, the only thing in Versailles that truly smells clean is the one no one wants to talk about. The next time you're summoned to the king's quarters, the air feels heavier, more ceremonial. Today isn't about fashion or games or gossip. It's about silence and scent. You've been invited to witness something rarely granted to outsiders, the anointing of royal linens. You arrive before dawn, when the palace is hushed and shadows cling to the corners of the gilded halls. Inside the linen chamber everything is white. Sheets, handkerchiefs, undergarments, nightshirts. But none of it is simple. Each piece is embroidered with the royal cipher, folded with geometric precision and arranged like relics waiting for worship. They're not laundered like a servant's rags. These are not scrubbed in basins or dried on ropes. No, royal linens are dressed, washed elsewhere in distilled rainwater, dried between fine linen cloths and steeped in herbal infusions. Today's selection: lavender, verbena and chamomile, with a few drops of attar of rose. A pair of women begin the process. One dips a cloth in scented water and lays it across the king's pillowcase, pressing slowly, rhythmically. Another dribbles essence of lemon onto a folded shirt cuff. A priest-like hush fills the room. You're told that for decades the king's bed sheets were treated this way, each fold perfumed, each nightshirt layered with meaning. It wasn't merely hygiene, it was an act of sovereignty. If he lay down upon it, it had to smell divine, not human. But the reality was more complicated. One of the attendants, older than the rest, leans close to you while smoothing a lace edge. The old king, she whispers, meaning Louis XIV, never changed his sheets more than once every few months, but they were perfumed daily. Her mouth twists, amused. So they always smelled new, even when they weren't. You blink. She smiles. That's Versailles. You move to the window and watch a new set of linens being brought in, delivered not by servants, but by guards. Guarded linen. Because what touches the king's skin is sacred. Even his sweat is framed in gold. The robes worn closest to the king's body are stored in cedar-lined chests, between pressed lavender leaves and curls of ivory soap. But few dare open them without gloves, not because of dirt, but because of the idea of proximity to his flesh. Touching his linen is touching him, and that is reserved for only the most trusted hands. You begin to understand something. Cleanliness at Versailles is less about health and more about hierarchy. It's not about what's clean. It's about who gets to decide what counts as clean. The king's linen may never see soap, but if it smells of lemon oil and rose, then it is deemed clean by decree. Meanwhile, the laundress who boiled your bedsheet in vinegar, she could scrub until her hands bled, and she'd still be considered unfit to touch silk. You reach out to feel one of the sheets. It's cool, impossibly smooth, and smells like spring rain over old wood. A scent so carefully composed it almost convinces you the sheet is fresh. But you know better now. It's not. Later that day, your curiosity carries you to a quieter wing of the palace, a forgotten hallway just beyond the Queen's chambers. A maid leads you with a candle through a narrow passage lined with cedar trunks and gilt-framed mirrors, many of them fogged with age. At the end waits a low wooden door, behind which lies one of Versailles' most peculiar treasures, the linen archive. It isn't a place of dust and decay as you might expect. No, this is a temple of textile memory. Inside, everything smells faintly of beeswax, pressed herbs and thyme. The shelves are stacked with folded linens, some so old the thread is nearly transparent. Tags dangle from each bundle, handwritten in elegant ink. Winter dressing gown, post-hunt, 1704. Queen's chamber undercloth, Epiphany, 1712. Dauphin's cot sheet, never used. Some are wrapped in muslin and sealed with ribbon, as though waiting to be unwrapped like a gift. You lean closer. The room hums with silence, like the linens are holding their breath. A curator in grey gloves begins explaining. Each piece here was worn, touched, or slept on by someone of importance. Some were never washed, only aired and perfumed. She says this not with shame, but reverence. She shows you a yellowed handkerchief. embroidered with the monogram of Madame de Montespan. Rosewater, clove and civet, she says, still faintly detectable. You lean in. She's right. The scent lingers, faint, animalic, like the shadow of a whisper. It hits you again. Here, scent is history. The past is not just written in letters or paintings. It's steeped into fabric. Each lingering aroma is a ghost. You ask if any linens were ever cleaned in water. Some, she replies, but rarely. For many here, water would have erased the soul of the garment. You're not sure whether to laugh or shiver. She takes out a particularly delicate shirt, once worn by the king during a summer ceremony. She points to a faint brown stain near the collar. Sweat, she says plainly. Never removed. Too risky. Instead, she explains, it was treated with orris root and dried in lavender smoke, so the scent would evolve, not vanish. It becomes part of the object's identity. You begin to wonder what stories your own scent might one day tell. You leave the archive subdued. In the golden halls of Versailles, the illusion of purity reigns. The linens may shimmer like snow, but inside the threads lie years of perspiration, perfume, and pride. That evening, as you lie on your own bed, sheets freshly dusted with orange blossom, you run your hand across the pillowcase. It's soft, but beneath the floral veil there's something else. A shadow, a memory, a scent that isn't yours. And now you know, at Versailles, even the cleanest thing you touch has a past clinging to it. You awaken to the sharp clatter of hooves outside your chamber window. Carriages arriving, voices raised, dogs barking in the courtyard. A foreign dignitary has arrived, and the palace is shifting. You dress quickly, but the mood is different today. The usual thick veil of perfume seems even stronger, almost cloying, like the whole chateau is trying too hard to smell like something it isn't. You follow the noise down a side passage, past a row of arched windows where the sunlight strikes clouds of powder drifting mid-air. A maid is vigorously dusting the drapes, except she isn't removing dust, she's applying it. Rice powder, scented with orris root and violet, onto velvet, onto tapestry, onto wood. This, apparently, is called scent layering. You've seen nobles powder themselves, of course, but powdering the walls, the very furniture. You duck into a gallery just as two footmen begin dusting a chandelier, not with cloths or brushes, but with puffs of scented powder blown from silver pipes. The air tastes faintly of bergamot and clove. You sneeze. No one reacts. You try to sit on a bench near the grand staircase, only to find it's been coated in lavender talc. When you stand again, the back of your coat bears the pale print of Versailles itself. A ghostly mark of compliance. A young page sees your discomfort and smiles. It's to prepare for their noses, he says. Foreigners don't understand Versailles scent. We must overwhelm them quickly. Overwhelm is an understatement. Down in the entry hall, potpourri is being loaded into the hollow legs of statues. Yes, hollow. A neat little trick from an earlier century. You touch one discreetly and catch a rush of myrrh and orange peel. You imagine a guest stepping near, inhaling deeply and thinking, how marvellous it smells here. And indeed it does. But you know now that this isn't cleanliness, it's theatre. Even the stables have joined the performance. You stroll past the royal carriage house, where grooms are brushing the horses, not just to groom them, but to perfume them. One rubs a stallion's flank with a cloth soaked in rosewater and verbena oil. The creature snorts, unimpressed, but the attendants seem pleased. A guard laughs as you pass. We like our animals sweeter than our enemies. Back inside, you watch servants spritz orange blossom water along the window ledges, where sunlight will activate the scent. Others are steaming peppermint oil into the corridors. The entire palace is like a living sachet, one long scented breath. It should feel magical. It should dazzle. Instead, it starts to itch. Behind your ears, where your valet applied violet oil that morning, your skin tingles. Your collar chafes with the powder pressed into its seams. Your tongue feels coated. You can taste Versailles now. Not its food, not its wine, but its perfume. And underneath it all, a question lingers. What happens when the scent fades? Because everything does fade. Here, the silk loses its shimmer. The wigs fall limp. The roses in the fountain bowls wilt by noon. And the perfume, it's sprayed again, and again, and again. Not to cleanse, but to erase the evidence. You retreat to the outer gardens for a breath of unperfumed air, stepping beyond the gilded gates of Versailles' sensory machine. But even here the influence lingers. A gardener tips his hat as you pass. You pause. He's sprinkling crushed rosemary onto the gravel paths. Not for pests, not for plants, for scent. The very walkways are seasoned like stew. Further down the promenade, a row of citrus trees has been arranged purely for their fragrance. No one eats the fruit. They're decorative air fresheners in terracotta pots. The smell of orange blossom greets every visiting noble before they even reach the palace door. A floral handshake of power. And beneath it all, you finally start to feel the weight of it. Versailles is more than gold and mirrors. It's a sensory fortress, built not just to impress the eyes, but to control the nose. Every whiff you take is curated, every breath choreographed. You wander toward the Queen's Grove hoping for quiet, but even here attendants are preparing for an evening promenade. Lemon balm is being rubbed into the bark of trees. Muslin sachets hang from branches like strange fruit, filled with powdered rose petals and nutmeg. A servant walks past with a bucket of mint-infused water, which he slowly pours into the rill so the streams themselves will carry fragrance. You reach for the trunk of an elm, expecting rough bark, but instead your fingers press into something soft. It's been rubbed with beeswax and lavender oil. You can't help but laugh. Even the trees are wearing perfume. Back in the palace that evening, a foreign envoy leans in close to you during the supper toast. Versailles, he says, his voice laced with awe, smells like no place on earth. You smile and don't answer, because you know what he doesn't. You know that just beneath the musk and floral haze, the palace fights a losing battle. Against sweat, against damp, against life. The perfume is a mask, a beautiful, intricate, exhausting mask, and maintaining it, every hour, every day, is a labour of such scale it's nearly invisible. Hundreds of servants, barrels of herbs, a budget that rivals a small kingdom's military. You think back to the laundry-maid's red hands, to the soap you saw boiling in copper pots behind the kitchens, to the silent gardener who tended mint just for rinsing basins. These were the unseen warriors of Versailles, the ones who tried to clean a place that didn't want to be clean, only to seem clean. Before retiring, you walk once more through the Hall of Mirrors. The candles have been lit. The scent of wax mingles with orange, musk, and a strange sweetness. Ambergris, maybe. You glance at your reflection in the polished glass. Powder clings to your cuffs. Oil glistens faintly on your cheek. You don't look clean. You look curated. And that, you realise, is the true Versailles. Not a palace of hygiene, but of illusion. A masterpiece of scented deceit. A place where smell became status, and reality was what you could perfume into belief. You wake earlier than usual on your final morning at Versailles. The sky outside your high window is misted grey, the sun only a suggestion behind the fog. For the first time there is no trumpet, no laughter in the halls, no slam of boots in the corridor. Only the soft creak of the beams above you, and the distant coo of doves. The palace is breathing. You rise quietly and dress without assistance, choosing a plainer coat, one that hasn't been dusted in violet powder. Your skin feels grateful. The air on your neck is cool and clean. You pass through empty galleries where the scent has faded overnight, like ghosts retreating into the woodwork. Today, you decide, you'll visit the attic. Not the gilded salons, not the linen rooms or perfume chambers, but the spaces above them, the ones no courtier brags about, the ones that hold the truth Versailles rarely lets slip. You find the staircase hidden behind a tapestry, narrow, steep, unfinished. Dust clings to the banister. The air is dry, and instead of perfume there's the earthy tang of wood, of linen, of age. You keep climbing, and the glamour falls away with each step. At the top, a low wooden door opens onto a crooked attic filled with trunks, broken furniture, unused chamber pots, and bundles of cloth tied in twine. The beams above your head are so low you have to stoop. Sunlight comes in fractured through small circular windows, and the smell, it's honest. Mice, wax, thyme, soap shavings, old sweat. It smells like real life. Like the homes of farmers and tailors and stable hands. It smells like people. You crouch beside one of the bundles and find an old set of servant uniforms, still bearing the faint blue-grey of the livery. There's a broken comb tucked into the sleeve, and an old cloth with a faint trace of lemon. Not enough to scent a corridor, but enough to remind you someone once tried. You find a set of boots with worn soles, the leather cracked, the scent of human feet still faintly caught in the lining. There's no pretense up here, no lavender oil or civet musk, just residue. A sudden gust rattles the beams and a little plume of attic dust rises, dances in the sunbeam, then settles. You sit on a low crate and breathe it all in. Not deeply, it isn't pleasant, but it is real. It grounds you. Reminds you that beneath all the gold leaf, Versailles was filled with people trying to live, trying to bathe, to breathe, to hide the scent of their exhaustion. From up here, you can just make out the curve of the gardens, the top of the hall of mirrors, the orange trees on the terrace. The palace looks quiet, peaceful, but now you know the effort behind it. You've seen the powders and perfumes. You've touched the perfumed benches, the scented fountains, the linen pressed by trembling hands. You've watched scent become power. And now, sitting among the things no one wants to smell, you understand the full weight of it. Cleanliness here was never about soap. It was about control. As the palace stirs awake below you, you remain in the attic just a little longer. The quiet here is like a second skin, unpowdered, unscented, unpretending. The kind of quiet you won't find in the Hall of Mirrors or the Queen's perfumed alcove. And for a brief moment, Versailles feels human. You notice a cracked mirror propped against a crate. Not the kind gilded with bronze and shined by chambermaids, but a servant's mirror, small, its silver backing peeling at the edges. You catch your reflection, undone hair, dusty sleeves, no perfumed shadow behind you. You smile. You realise how much of your stay was filtered through rose-scented gloves, jasmine-soaked hallways, violet-drenched linens. But here, the scent of dry wood and old garments tells a different story. One of labour, of exhaustion, of the bodies Versailles works so hard to disguise. And that, perhaps, is the most bizarre part of Versailles' hygiene. Not what it included, but what it hid. The smells that were masked, the sweat that was powdered over, the sickness that was silenced with ambergris and myrrh. You think of the king's courtiers coating themselves in layers of musk to obscure what they feared, that no amount of power could truly stop the body from being a body. You descend the stairs slowly, re-entering the palace below. The powdered halls have begun to reawaken. The orange blossom has returned, but something has shifted. You no longer smell perfume. You smell effort. A young footman passes you, His hands reeking faintly of vinegar. He's been scrubbing floors. A maid stands by the window airing a bed pillow that smells faintly of mildew beneath the lavender. You nod at them with a quiet respect. The war continues, unseen. The daily illusion resumes. At the gates, your carriage is ready. The horses have been brushed with verbena, of course. You step in and glance back at the palace. The air behind you is thick with scent again. Resins, oils, crushed petals, melted wax. And now you know the truth of it. Versailles didn't conquer dirt. It smothered it in velvet and drowned it in roses. It didn't clean the world. It disguised it. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most human habit of all. You sit back against the perfumed velvet cushion, close your eyes, and let the scent pull you under, into memory, into illusion, into something half beautiful and half absurd. Because here at Versailles, the bazaar never really felt out of place. It simply smelled like it belonged. So now, as the last scents of Versailles drift behind you like a fading dream, let your breath grow slower. You've wandered through powdered corridors and perfume chambers, touched silks that never saw soap, and sat in attics where truth still clung to splinters and dust. You've watched a palace pretend so beautifully that it was clean, but now you don't need rosewater or musk. Just the soft rustle of sheets, the hush of a fan, the quiet company of your thoughts. Let your body feel safe exactly as it is. No powder needed, no mask required. Close your eyes and imagine yourself walking through that quiet garden one last time. The citrus trees sway gently in the breeze. The lavender sachets are still hanging like sleepy stars in the branches, and the air, for once, smells only of night. There's no court today, no trumpets, no layers of scent to interpret. Just you, under the open sky, where everything breathes honestly. Let go of Versailles now. Let the velvet fade, the mirrors dim, the perfumes settle back into silence. You're not there anymore. You're here, and it's time to rest.